For millennia, the Jedi had taught that the Force was omnipresent, touching all life, guiding destinies across countless worlds. But what they never considered, what they could never have imagined, was that beyond their galaxy, beyond the light of familiar stars, there existed powers that operated outside the Force entirely. Powers that answered to no cosmic balance. Powers that belonged to beings who had transcended mortality itself. And one of those beings had just torn through the fabric of space itself. Above the planet Lothal, in the Outer Rim territories, the night sky fractured. Not with the familiar blue-white tunnel of hyperspace, but with something far more wrong. Reality cracked like glass, black fissures spreading across the starfield as if the universe itself was breaking. Imperial sensor stations registered the anomaly immediately. Energy readings that made no sense, spatial distortions that violated every known law of physics, and a signature that their computers couldn't classify. It wasn't a ship, it wasn't a weapon, it wasn't anything in their databases. It was a gate. But this gate was dying, collapsing, torn open by forces that had never been meant to bridge universes. Through the shrieking dimensional wound, a single figure fell. He dropped through Lothal's atmosphere like a dark comet, wrapped in shadows that writhed with impossible life. The friction that should have incinerated any falling object simply parted around him, repelled by an aura that existed in defiance of natural law. His black coat, reinforced by magic and the essence of conquered enemies, didn't burn. His eyes, glowing with purple light, remained fixed on the rapidly approaching ground. Sung Jin Woo, Shadow Monarch and humanity's greatest hunter, crashed into the barren plains outside Lothal's capital city with the force of an orbital strike. The impact crater spread 100 meters wide. Dust and pulverized rock exploded outward in a mushroom cloud that painted the night orange with reflected city lights. Seismic sensors across the region screamed warnings. Imperial patrols scrambled. And in the depths of space, far beyond this backwater world, something ancient and patient felt a disturbance that was not of the Force. Jin Woo stood in the center of the crater, completely unharmed. Dust settled around him in swirling patterns, disturbed by the cold aura that radiated from his presence. He rolled his shoulders, checking his condition with the instinctive efficiency of someone who had survived 10 years in the most brutal dungeons imaginable. No injuries, no system errors. His mana reserves were full. The shadows responded to his will, coiling around his feet like loyal hounds awaiting commands. But this wasn't Earth. This wasn't even a dungeon. His detection skills swept outward automatically, painting the area in his mind's eye. The city ahead registered thousands of life signatures. Human and non-human species his system classified as unknown. Flying vehicles moved through the air in organized streams. Massive structures of metal and light dominated the landscape. And approaching rapidly from multiple directions were armed forces, their intent clearly hostile. Jin Woo's expression remained neutral as he analyzed the situation. He'd faced worse than confused locals. The real question was, where exactly had that collapsing S-rank gate thrown him? Surroundings. Definitely not Earth, he muttered, his voice carrying an edge of cold calculation. His hand moved to his inventory, still accessible, thankfully. His daggers materialized in his grip, their familiar weight reassuring. And those energy readings. He sensed them before he saw them. 4 flying craft approaching at high speed, searchlights cutting through the settling dust. They were primitive compared to the technology he'd seen in high-level dungeons, but they moved with military precision. Jin Woo's eyes narrowed as the vessels, Imperial TIE fighters, though he had no name for them yet, screamed overhead, circling the crater like predatory birds. Unidentified entity, You are in violation of Imperial space. A harsh voice crackled from speakers on the lead fighter. Remain where you are. Ground forces are en route to secure the area. Imperial. The word meant nothing to Jin Woo, but the tone meant everything. Authority, expectation of obedience. The assumption that he would comply simply because they possessed weapons. He'd heard that tone before, from the monarchs who thought themselves gods. Jin Woo didn't respond. Instead, he activated his stealth skill, and his presence simply vanished. One moment he stood in plain sight. The next, he was invisible to every sensor, every eye, every form of detection the TIE fighters possessed. The pilots' confused shouts echoed through their comm channels as their target disappeared from targeting computers and visual confirmation simultaneously. Target lost. Repeat, target lost. Impossible. Nothing on scanners. Visual negative. Where did it? Jin Woo was already moving, his enhanced speed carrying him out of the crater in a blur that would have been invisible even without stealth active. He needed information. He needed to understand this place, these people, and how he was going to get home. The gate had collapsed completely. He'd felt it shatter as he fell through. Until he understood the dimensional laws of this universe, he was stranded. But Sung Jin Woo had built an empire from nothing before. He'd conquered death itself. A new galaxy? That was just another challenge. As he raced toward the city, shadows gathering in his wake like a cloak of living darkness, the Imperial forces scrambled to explain how their target had simply ceased to exist. They would file reports. Those reports would climb the chain of command. And eventually, those reports would reach individuals who understood that some threats couldn't be explained by conventional wisdom. The Empire had hunted Force users to near extinction. They had crushed rebellions across 1,000 worlds. They controlled a galaxy through fear and overwhelming military might. They had no idea what was about to hunt them back. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The city of Lothal rose before Jin Woo like a monument to a civilization he didn't recognize. Towers of metal and light stretched toward the stars, connected by bridges and transit systems that defied his earthborn understanding of urban planning. But beneath the alien architecture, he recognized something universal: the stench of oppression. Armed patrols on every corner, citizens who walked with heads down, avoiding eye contact with soldiers in white armor. Propaganda broadcasts echoing from public screens. He'd seen this before, in his own world. Different uniforms, different technology, but the same fundamental truth. The strong preying on the weak, backed by the apparatus of state violence. Jin Woo's eyes glowed faintly purple in the darkness as he watched a patrol of stormtroopers harass a street vendor. One of the soldiers shoved the alien merchant, a Twi'lek, though Jin Woo had no name for the species, sending produce scattering across the pavement. The shadows around Jin Woo writhed with barely contained hunger. His army sensed his mood, eager to emerge and feed. But he held them back. Patience. Information first. Understanding the battlefield before committing to action. That had always been his way. Even as the weakest hunter, he'd survived through careful planning. Now, as the Shadow Monarch, that patience was backed by power that could reshape worlds. The galaxy would learn that soon enough. The Imperial Security Bureau's regional headquarters on Lothal received the crater report at 0347 local time. Lieutenant Yogar Least stared at the sensor data with growing confusion, then mounting alarm. The energy signature made no sense. The impact force suggested a capital ship collision, yet there was no debris, no radiation, no hyperspace trail. Just a perfect crater and witnesses reporting a single humanoid figure walking away unharmed. And then, vanishing completely. "Run the sensor logs again," List ordered, his voice tight. "Check for equipment malfunction." "Sir, we've run diagnostics 3 times," the technician replied, her fingers dancing across the console. "All systems nominal. The target simply stopped existing. Not cloaked. Cloaked objects still generate sensor shadows. This was complete erasure from every detection method simultaneously." List felt cold sweat bead on his forehead. In the 2 years since the Empire had risen, he'd learned that impossible events were always classified above his pay grade. Force users, experimental weapons, things the Emperor kept locked away in black site facilities. This had that same feeling, the sense that he was staring at something he wasn't cleared to understand. "Contact the Inquisitors," he said quietly. "This might be one of theirs." Meanwhile, in the industrial sector of Capital City, Sung Jin Woo was conducting his own investigation. He'd watched for 3 hours, moving through the city like a ghost, his stealth skill rendering him undetectable to the hundreds of patrols searching for him. The more he observed, the clearer the picture became. This was an empire in the truest sense. Military occupation, forced labor, public executions broadcast as warnings. The technology was impressive. Energy weapons, faster than light travel, artificial gravity. But the social structure was ancient and brutal. A pyramid of power with these Imperials at the top, grinding everyone else beneath their heels. Jinwoo had no context for the galactic history, no knowledge of the Republic that had fallen or the Jedi who'd been slaughtered. But he understood tyranny when he saw it. More importantly, he understood opportunity. He stood on a rooftop overlooking an Imperial depot, watching stormtroopers load cargo onto transport ships. His detection skill painted each soldier in his mind's eye. Combat-trained, disciplined, but fundamentally ordinary humans in armor. Weak, fragile, perfect material for his army. The system interface flickered in his vision, responding to his intent. Shadow extraction available on defeated enemies. Current Shadow Army, 10,000 plus soldiers. Mana, 100%. Jinwoo's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. His army had come through the dimensional breach intact, waiting in his shadow for the command to emerge. Baru, Igris, Iron, Tusk, his strongest soldiers, each one a nightmare given form. He could level this city in an hour if he chose. Could raise every fallen soldier as an undead servant loyal only to him. But that wasn't how you built an empire. That was how you attracted the kind of attention that forced you to fight the entire galaxy at once. No. Better to move carefully. Learn the power structures. Identify the key players. Then strike with overwhelming force when he understood the battlefield completely. A commotion below interrupted his thoughts. 3 stormtroopers had cornered a human woman in an alley, their body language aggressive. Jinwoo's enhanced hearing picked up their words. Threats, demands for identification, the promise of detention for suspicious behavior. The woman's fear was palpable, her hands raised in surrender. Jinwoo watched dispassionately. Not his problem, not his world. He had no stake in the local conflicts of a galaxy he'd accidentally fallen into. But then one of the stormtroopers raised his rifle, powering up the weapon with casual cruelty, and something cold settled in Jinwoo's chest. He'd spent too long fighting monsters who preyed on the helpless, had rebuilt himself from the weakest hunter into the Shadow Monarch specifically to ensure that the strong couldn't arbitrarily brutalize the weak. Old habits died hard. Jinwoo stepped off the rooftop. He didn't fall, gravity simply ceased to apply as ruler's authority caught him, lowering him to the alley floor with perfect silence. His stealth held until he was 3 meters behind the stormtroopers. Then he let it drop. "Step away from her," Jin Woo said in Korean, his words meaningless to everyone present. The stormtroopers spun, weapons rising. For a frozen moment, they stared at the dark-clad figure who'd appeared from nowhere, his eyes glowing purple in the alley's shadows. Then training kicked in, and they opened fire. Blaster bolts, superheated plasma packets traveling at relativistic speeds, screamed toward Jin Woo's center mass. In any conventional combat scenario, he would have been vaporized. The Empire's weapons were designed to punch through duraplast armor and cook flesh to ash. Jin Woo caught the first bolt with ruler's authority, freezing it in midair like an insect in amber. The second and third bolts joined it, 3 points of red light hanging motionless between him and the stormtroopers. The soldiers' shocked gasps were audible even through their helmet speakers. "Interesting," Jin Woo murmured, studying the captured energy. Not bullets, not magic, something in between. Concentrated heat and force contained in a coherent packet. Primitive compared to the S-rank dungeon's reality warping attacks, but effective against unenhanced targets. He flicked his wrist. The 3 bolts reversed direction at twice their original speed. The stormtroopers didn't have time to scream. The redirected plasma punched through their armor like paper, dropping all 3 in smoking heaps. Their weapons clattered to the pavement. Their life signs flickered out instantly on Jin Woo's detection skill. And then something extraordinary happened. The system, which had been quiet since his arrival, suddenly blazed with notifications. "You have defeated Imperial Stormtrooper, Human. You have defeated Imperial Stormtrooper, Human. You have defeated Imperial Stormtrooper, Human. Shadow extraction available." Jin Woo's eyes widened fractionally. The system worked here. Whatever dimensional laws governed this galaxy, they were compatible enough with his abilities to allow shadow extraction. Which meant... He extended his hand toward the fallen soldiers, his voice carrying the absolute authority of the monarch. "Arise." The shadows beneath the corpses exploded upward in pillars of black smoke. The woman who'd been about to be executed screamed and scrambled backward, pressing herself against the alley wall. She watched in horror as the 3 stormtroopers rose to their feet, wreathed in darkness, their armor now blackened and their eyes glowing with the same purple light as their new master. They knelt in perfect unison. Shadow extraction successful. Shadow soldier, stormtrooper, X3 added to army. Jin Woo studied his new soldiers with clinical interest. They retained their training, their muscle memory, their knowledge of Imperial protocols. But now, they were his, bound to his will with chains stronger than any loyalty programming. They would never disobey, never question, never betray. "Stand," he commanded. The shadows obeyed instantly, taking positions around him like honor guards. Jin Woo turned his attention to the woman, who was staring at him with a mixture of terror and awe. She said something in a language he didn't understand, rapid, frightened words that his system helpfully flagged as Galactic Basic, but didn't translate. Language barrier that would need to be addressed. He reached toward her, not threateningly, and placed his hand briefly on her forehead. One of the benefits of the monarch's power, the ability to extract memories, skills, and knowledge from the defeated. He'd never tried it on a living, unwilling target before, but the principle should be the same. The woman's eyes rolled back as Jin Woo's mana swept through her consciousness, copying linguistic patterns and basic galactic knowledge. It took 3 seconds. When he released her, she collapsed, gasping but unharmed. The information flooded Jin Woo's mind. Language structure, common phrases, and, most valuably, contextual understanding of this galaxy's major powers: Empire, Rebellion, the Force, Jedi Sith, hyperspace, a galactic government overthrown and replaced by a military dictatorship. And underlying everything, this force, an energy field that these people believed connected all living things. Something they could sense and manipulate, bending reality through mystical power. Jin Woo's expression remained neutral, but internally he was calculating rapidly. The force sounded similar to mana, but the woman's memories suggested it worked on completely different principles. Force users, these Jedi and Sith, could sense each other through their connection to this energy field. But could they sense him? His power came from an entirely different source. The system, the rulers and monarchs, the shadow dimension itself. He would need to test that hypothesis carefully. "Go," Jin Woo said in newly acquired Galactic Basic, his accent perfect despite using the language for the first time. "Tell no one what you saw here." The woman didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled to her feet and ran, disappearing into the maze of alleyways without looking back. Jin Woo watched her go, then turned his attention to his 3 new shadow soldiers. They stood motionless, awaiting commands with the patience of the undead. Behind them, deeper in the shadows of the alley, Jin Woo could sense his true army stirring. 10,000 soldiers waiting for the order to emerge. Baru's chittering anticipation, Igris's silent readiness. "Not yet," Jin Woo murmured to his shadows. "First, we learn. Then we conquer." He had the beginning of a plan now. This empire controlled the galaxy through military might and fear. They'd never encountered an enemy who could turn their fallen soldiers against them. Who could build an army that grew stronger with every battle? Who existed completely outside their understanding of power? The Jedi were gone, the Force users scattered or dead. The Empire thought they'd eliminated all significant threats to their rule. They were wrong. Sung Jin Woo looked up at the sky, where star destroyers hung in orbit like gray daggers pointed at the planet below. Somewhere beyond this world, in the depths of space, the true powers of this galaxy waited. The Emperor. This Darth Vader the woman's memories had shown him. Military commanders and Force users who could actually pose a challenge. Good. Jin Woo had always performed best against overwhelming odds. His shadow soldiers fell into step behind him as he walked deeper into the city. He had resources now. Information. A foothold in this strange new galaxy. And most importantly, he had time. The Empire had built their power over 2 decades. Jin Woo had conquered death and become a monarch in less than 10 years. He wondered how long it would take to claim a galaxy. The 5th brother felt it 3 days after the initial crater report crossed his desk. Not a disturbance in the Force. That would have been comprehensible. Something the Inquisitorius was trained to hunt. This was the opposite. A void. A cold absence that moved through Lothal's population centers like a shark through dark water, leaving no ripples, but somehow altering everything in its wake. He stood on the bridge of his personal Corvette, staring down at Capital City through the viewport. His yellow eyes narrowed behind his angular helmet. The Force swirled around him normally, responding to his call. But when he reached out toward that specific sector of the city, nothing. Not darkness, not light, just emptiness, as if someone had cut a hole in the fabric of reality itself. "Inquisitor," his Imperial liaison said nervously, "we've compiled the incident reports you requested. 17 stormtrooper patrols have gone missing in the past 72 hours. No distress calls, no bodies. They simply failed to report back from their assigned sectors." "Missing," the 5th brother repeated, his voice a low rumble. "Not dead?" "We don't know, sir. There's no evidence of combat, no witnesses. The patrols just vanish." The 5th brother's hand clenched around his lightsaber hilt. Vanishing stormtroopers, a void in the Force, and that impact crater with its impossible readings. These weren't coincidences. Something was hunting Imperial forces, and it was intelligent enough to avoid leaving evidence. "Prepare a strike team," he ordered. "Full company, heavy weapons. I'm going to the surface." In the industrial underbelly of Capital City, Sung Jin Woo had established his first base of operations. The abandoned factory complex had been empty for months, its previous owners arrested on fabricated charges, just another casualty of Imperial occupation. Now it served as the staging ground for something the galaxy had never seen: the birth of a shadow kingdom. Jin Woo sat, cross-legged in the center of the main floor, his eyes closed in meditation. Around him, his shadow army had manifested in physical form. Not all 10,000, that would draw too much attention, but enough to demonstrate the scope of what he was building. 50 shadow stormtroopers stood in perfect formation, their blackened armor gleaming with supernatural energy. They were the scouts, the infiltrators, the ones who could move through Imperial installations without immediately triggering alarms. Their knowledge of codes, protocols, and patrol routes had already proven invaluable. Behind them stood his elites. Baru, the massive shadow ant, his chitinous form scraping against the factory's high ceiling. Igris, the blood-red knight, his spectral armor radiating cold authority. Iron, the hulking tank. Tusk, the high orc commander, each one powerful enough to level a city block single-handedly. But Jin Woo wasn't building an army to destroy cities. He was building an intelligence network. "Report," he said without opening his eyes. One of the shadow stormtroopers stepped forward. Its voice was hollow, echoing with the reverberation of the dead. "Master, we have infiltrated 3 Imperial facilities. Security codes obtained. Patrol schedules mapped. We have identified the command structure for this sector." Jin Woo's eyes opened, glowing purple in the factory's darkness. "And the larger picture?" Another shadow spoke. This one pulled from an Imperial officer Jin Woo had encountered 2 days prior. "The Empire controls approximately 70% of the known galaxy. Capital is the planet Coruscant, located in the core worlds. Current Emperor Palpatine, Supreme Military Commander Darth Vader. Both are identified as Force users of extreme power." Force users. Jin Woo had been researching this phenomenon intensively, using the memories extracted from defeated enemies. The Force was this galaxy's equivalent of mana, but it worked through biological mechanisms, microscopic organisms called midichlorians that lived in all cells. Those with high concentrations could sense and manipulate the Force, performing feats that seemed like magic: telekinesis, precognition, enhanced physical abilities, even limited mind control. The Jedi had been peacekeepers, wielders of the light side of the Force, dedicated to protecting the innocent. The Empire had exterminated them 2 decades ago, hunting down even the youngest children to ensure no threat remained. The Sith were the dark side practitioners, manipulators, conquerors, beings who embraced passion and power without restraint. According to the memories Jin Woo had absorbed, there were only 2 left: the Emperor and his enforcer, Vader. Jin Woo found the entire philosophy somewhat naive. Light and dark, as if morality could be divided so cleanly. He'd spent his entire life in the gray zones, doing whatever was necessary to survive and protect those he cared about. The rulers had called themselves light. The monarchs had been cast as darkness. But in the end, both sides had been willing to sacrifice entire dimensions to win their war. Power was power. How you used it defined you, not which mystical energy field you drew from. "These Inquisitors," Jin Woo said, standing smoothly. The Force users who hunt Jedi survivors, are they a threat? The Shadow officer tilted its head, accessing memories. Analysis suggests moderate threat individually. They are not Sith, merely Force sensitives trained in dark side techniques. Dangerous to ordinary soldiers. Against a monarch. The Shadow's tone carried something that might have been contempt. Insufficient. Jin Woo nodded. That matched his assessment. He'd reviewed enough memories now to understand the scale of Force user abilities. Impressive by normal standards, certainly. A skilled Jedi or Sith could slaughter hundreds of ordinary soldiers. But compared to the S-rank hunters he'd fought alongside, or the monarchs he'd defeated, they were strong, but not overwhelmingly so. The real threats were the Emperor and Vader. Multiple memories painted them as monsters, beings whose power eclipsed ordinary Force users by orders of magnitude. Vader particularly, a dark lord who'd personally led the purge against the Jedi, killing masters and children alike without mercy. Jin Woo would need to see them in action before making final judgments. Memory was subjective. Fear distorted perception. He'd learned never to trust second-hand assessments of an enemy's capabilities. Master, Beru chittered, his massive ant head swiveling toward the factory entrance. Someone approaches, multiple hostiles. They carry the taint of this Force you've been researching. Jin Woo's detection skill confirmed it a moment later. 47 signatures converging on the factory. 45 were ordinary soldiers, stormtroopers based on their equipment signatures. But 2 were different. One radiated heat and aggression, its presence somehow twisted in ways Jin Woo's skill had trouble quantifying. The other was cooler, more controlled, but no less dangerous. Force users, coming directly to him. They found us faster than expected, Jin Woo observed mildly. Either they're more competent than the memories suggest, or someone talked. The woman, Igris said, his spectral voice like wind through a graveyard. The one you spared. She may have reported despite your command. Possibly. Jin Woo had considered killing her to ensure silence, but he'd never liked murdering innocents, even for strategic advantage. That was a line he'd crossed too many times during the war against the monarchs. If maintaining his principles meant dealing with occasional complications, so be it. Return to my Shadow, Jin Woo commanded. All except the stormtrooper squadron. I want to test something. His army dissolved into black smoke, flowing back into Jin Woo's shadow like water down a drain. Only the 50 Shadow stormtroopers remained, standing at attention with supernatural stillness. To outside observation, they would appear as normal Imperial soldiers, at least until someone looked closely enough to notice the purple glow in their visors. Jin Woo walked to the factory's main entrance and pushed the corroded doors open. The night air of Lothal rushed in, carrying the smell of industrial waste and distant fires. 300 meters away, the Imperial strike team had established a perimeter. Troop carriers hovered in position. Stormtroopers had taken cover behind portable barriers, their rifles aimed at the factory entrance. And walking toward him, flanked by 2 soldiers, came a figure that made Jin Woo's analytical mind snap into focus. The 5th brother was imposing by any standard. Over 2 meters tall, his gray skin marked with ritualistic tattoos, his eyes burning yellow with Sith corruption. He wore black armor that seemed designed more for intimidation than protection, and in his hand he carried a weapon that Jin Woo recognized from extracted memories. A lightsaber. The blade was currently deactivated, but the weapon's hilt was elaborate, circular, and clearly designed for a unique fighting style. More interesting was what Jin Woo sensed from him. That strange energy, the Force, flowed through the Inquisitor like electricity through a circuit. It enhanced his physical abilities, sharpened his senses, and most importantly, allowed him to perceive things beyond normal human capability. The fifth brother stopped 20 meters from Jin Woo, his yellow eyes widening fractionally. When he spoke, his voice carried genuine confusion. "What are you?" Jin Woo tilted his head slightly. "A visitor. One you should have left alone." "You're not a Jedi," the fifth brother continued, ignoring the implicit threat. "I sense no Force connection. You're not even Force sensitive. Yet you've killed Imperial soldiers and evaded our detection for 3 days. That should be impossible." "Your impossibility," Jin Woo said calmly, "is my normal." The fifth brother's hand moved to his lightsaber. "You'll be coming with me. The Emperor will want to study you. If you resist, I'm authorized to use lethal force." Jin Woo almost smiled. How many times had he heard variations of that speech? Guild investigators threatening to arrest him for violating regulations. Association officials trying to bring him in for questioning. Monarchs demanding his surrender before inevitable execution. The powerful always spoke the same language: submit or die. They never expected anyone to choose the third option. "I'll give you one chance," Jin Woo said, his voice dropping to a temperature that made frost form on the factory's metal walls. "Leave now. Report to your superiors that this world is under my protection. Any further Imperial aggression will be met with overwhelming retaliation." The fifth brother's response was to ignite his lightsaber. The crimson blade sprang to life with a snap hiss that echoed across the industrial complex. The weapon spun once, twice, the circular hilt rotating in the Inquisitor's grip with practiced ease. "Last warning," the fifth brother said. "Surrender or die." Jin Woo's eyes blazed purple, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Behind him, 50 shadow stormtroopers raised their weapons in perfect synchronization. The movement was too precise, too unified, too obviously wrong. The Imperial soldiers in the perimeter noticed immediately, their comm channels lighting up with confused chatter. "Those stormtroopers, why are their visors glowing? Something's wrong with them." The fifth brother felt it then, the wrongness emanating from the soldiers behind Jin Woo. They weren't alive. The Force showed him nothing when he reached toward them. No life signatures, no presence. Just hollow shells animated by something that existed outside the Force entirely. "Necromancy," the Inquisitor breathed, his tactical assessment shifting instantly. "You're raising the dead." "I prefer giving them purpose," Jin Woo corrected. "They serve me better now than they ever served your empire." The fifth brother made his decision. This wasn't a capture mission anymore. This was an extermination. Whatever this being was, whatever power allowed it to raise the dead and exist outside the Force, it couldn't be allowed to spread. "Open fire," the fifth brother roared. "Kill them all." 45 stormtroopers opened fire simultaneously. The night erupted in red plasma bolts, hundreds of shots screaming toward Jin Woo and his shadow soldiers. The sound was deafening, a storm of superheated death designed to vaporize everything in the kill zone. Jin Woo raised one hand. Ruler's authority. Every single blaster bolt stopped in midair. 300 points of red light hung frozen in space, painting the battlefield in crimson illumination. The stormtroopers' shocked gasps were audible even over the sudden silence. The fifth brother's eyes widened. That wasn't the Force. He could sense Force telekinesis. It had a signature, a disturbance in the cosmic flow. This was something else entirely, something that operated on principles his training had never covered. Jin Woo's hand clenched into a fist, and 300 blaster bolts reversed direction. The massacre lasted 3 seconds. Plasma fire designed to pierce armor tore through Imperial ranks like a scythe through wheat. Stormtroopers fell screaming, their white armor painted with carbon scoring and melted plastoid. The troop carriers exploded in balls of orange flame. Within moments, 45 elite soldiers had been reduced to smoking corpses. The fifth brother had survived only by using the Force to enhance his speed, diving behind a cargo container as the death storm passed overhead. He came up with lightsaber blazing, reaching out with the Force to crush Jin Woo's windpipe, a killing technique that had served him well against Jedi survivors. The invisible pressure closed around Jin Woo's throat and stopped, completely, as if it had encountered a wall that the Force simply couldn't penetrate. Jin Woo looked at the Inquisitor with something approaching disappointment. "Is that really all you have?" Then he moved. The fifth brother was a trained Force user, his reflexes enhanced beyond human limits. He'd fought Jedi Masters and won. His combat precognition gave him glimpses of attacks before they landed. None of it mattered. Jin Woo crossed 20 meters in less than a heartbeat, his S-rank speed making him appear as a black blur. His dagger, a weapon forged from the essence of conquered dungeon bosses, materialized in his hand and cut through the fifth brother's lightsaber defense like it wasn't there. The Inquisitor's precognition showed him the strike coming. He moved to block with Force-enhanced speed. The dagger still caught him across the chest, carving through armor and flesh with contemptuous ease. The fifth brother staggered backward, blood streaming from the wound. Impossible. Nothing moved that fast. No non-Force user had reflexes like that. Unless... "You're enhanced," the fifth brother gasped. "Some kind of technology." "Wrong," Jin Woo said, and kicked him. The impact sent the Inquisitor flying 30 meters, crashing through a cargo container and rolling to a stop in a heap of twisted metal. The fifth brother tried to rise, calling on the Force to heal his wounds, to enhance his strength, to do anything that might bridge the catastrophic gap between his power and his opponents. Jin Woo appeared above him, having crossed the distance in another impossible burst of speed. His foot came down on the Inquisitor's chest, pinning him to the ground with pressure that cracked ribs. "You're strong for this galaxy," Jin Woo observed clinically. "Your reflexes are enhanced, maybe 3 times normal human. Your telekinesis can lift several tons. Your precognition gives you a 1-second window on incoming attacks. Impressive." He pressed down harder, and the fifth brother screamed. "But I've fought beings who could shatter planets, who could manipulate time itself, who commanded armies of monsters that would make your empire soil their armor." The fifth brother's yellow eyes blazed with hatred and, for the first time in years, genuine fear. "The Emperor will kill you. Vader will hunt you to the edge of the galaxy." "Good," Jin Woo said. "I was hoping to meet them." He raised his hand, and shadow erupted from the ground around the fifth brother. The Inquisitor tried to fight, calling on every technique he knew, but the darkness was implacable. It wrapped around him like a shroud, seeping into his wounds, filling his lungs, dragging him down into something deeper than death. The fifth brother's last thought, before the shadows took him completely, was a desperate warning sent through the Force to his fellow Inquisitors. "Run." Then there was only darkness, and the voice of the Shadow Monarch. "Arise." The shadow that had been the fifth brother rose slowly, darkness pouring off its form like water. The Inquisitor's distinctive features remained: the gray skin, the ritual tattoos, the imposing stature. But now everything was rendered in shades of black and purple. His eyes, once burning yellow with Sith corruption, now glowed with the same ethereal light as all of Jin Woo's soldiers. Shadow extraction successful. Shadow Soldier, Inquisitor, added to Army. Special ability detected, Force sensitivity, dark side. Note: Shadow retains 80% of original Force capabilities. Jin Woo studied his newest acquisition with clinical interest. This was the first Force user he'd extracted, and the results were fascinating. The Shadow retained the Fifth Brother's combat training, his knowledge of Imperial protocols, and most intriguingly, his connection to the Force. It was diminished. The power flowing through the Shadow was perhaps 4/5 of what the living Inquisitor had commanded, but it was present, which meant the Force could interact with his shadows. They weren't completely outside its influence, just separate, like oil and water occupying the same space without truly mixing. "Kneel," Jin Woo commanded. The Shadow Inquisitor dropped to one knee instantly, its lightsaber igniting in a gesture of absolute submission. The crimson blade cast red light across the killing field, illuminating the 45 dead stormtroopers that littered the area. Jin Woo gestured toward the corpses. Those as well. All of them. His mana surged outward, and the shadows responded with hungry eagerness. Darkness erupted from beneath each fallen Imperial soldier, wrapping around them, consuming them, transforming them. One by one they rose, shadow stormtroopers to join his growing army. Shadow extraction successful X-45. Current Shadow Army, 10,000 plus soldiers, 95 stormtroopers, Wast Inquisitor. Jin Woo surveyed his expanded force with satisfaction. Nearly 100 Imperial soldiers converted in less than a week. At this rate, he could have thousands within a month. But numbers alone wouldn't conquer a galaxy. He needed strategic assets, infrastructure, intelligence on the true power players, and he needed to send a message. "Shadow Fifth Brother," Jin Woo said, addressing his newest acquisition. "You retain your predecessor's memories?" "Yes, Master." The Shadow's voice was hollow but clear, carrying an echo of the Inquisitor's original arrogance, now bent entirely to Jin Woo's will. "I know the locations of all Inquisitorious facilities, command codes, personnel rosters, the Emperor's standing orders regarding Force-sensitive targets." "And Vader, the Emperor? What do you know of their capabilities?" The Shadow hesitated, not from reluctance, but from the weight of the memories it carried. "Darth Vader is beyond comparison to standard Inquisitors. His power in the Force is second only to the Emperor himself. I have witnessed him kill Jedi Masters with casual ease. His physical enhancements allow him to fight for extended periods without fatigue. His precognition borders on true future sight. And his rage..." The Shadow's tone carried something that might have been awe. "His rage is an abyss that consumes everything it touches." Jin Woo filed that information away. A powerful Force user with combat enhancements and emotional instability. Dangerous, certainly, but not invincible. Rage made fighters predictable. Anger created openings. The Emperor? Emperor Palpatine's true capabilities are unknown even to the Inquisitorious. He rarely demonstrates his power directly. But the Fifth Brother witnessed him once, from a distance, during a meeting with rebellious Moffs. The Shadow's voice dropped. He killed 6 admirals with Force lightning so intense, it reduced them to ash in seconds. Without moving, without even raising his voice. The power radiating from him was... The Shadow struggled for words. Absolute, as if the dark side itself had taken mortal form. That was more concerning. Raw power was one thing. Jin Woo had fought the monarchs, beings who could reshape reality with a thought. But this Emperor sounded strategic, patient, and utterly ruthless. The kind of enemy who would study an opponent, identify weaknesses, and strike with overwhelming force at the perfect moment. Exactly the kind of enemy Jin Woo would be if their positions were reversed. "How long until the Empire realizes you're dead?" Jin Woo asked. The fifth brother was expected to report within 6 hours of planetfall. When he fails to do so, the Inquisitorius will send another, likely the seventh sister or the Grand Inquisitor himself. The Shadow paused. And they will inform Lord Vader. An Inquisitor's death is significant enough to warrant his personal attention. Jin Woo nodded slowly. Good. He wanted Vader's attention. Wanted the Empire to know that something had emerged on Lothal that their standard forces couldn't handle. But he needed to control the narrative. Ensure they saw him as a threat significant enough to investigate, but not so overwhelming that they'd glass the entire planet from orbit. A delicate balance. One that required the right kind of message. Shadow Fifth Brother, you're going to help me with that, Jin Woo said. But first, I need you to answer a question. Where is the nearest rebel cell? The Shadow's glowing eyes brightened with understanding. Clever, Master. The Spectres, a small rebel group operating from a modified VCX-100 light freighter. They've been conducting raids against Imperial facilities for the past year. Their base is mobile, but Imperial intelligence tracks them to the old comm tower district. Take me to them. Hera Syndulla was having a bad week. The Spectre's latest raid on an Imperial depot had yielded less than half the supplies she'd hoped for. Ezra was still reckless enough to nearly get caught during every operation, and their contact in the Imperial Security Bureau had just been transferred off-world. Now, at 0400 local time, her sensors were screaming about an unidentified signature approaching the Ghost's landing site. Kanan, she called over the ship's internal comm. We've got company, single humanoid, approaching from the industrial sector, moving fast. Kanan Jarrus, former Jedi Padawan and the Spectre's reluctant leader, was already reaching for his lightsaber before Hera finished speaking. He'd felt the disturbance an hour ago, a wrongness in the Force that had pulled him from meditation with a gasp. Something dark was moving through Lothal, something that made the Force itself recoil. I sense it, Kanan said, joining Hera in the cockpit. His hand rested on his lightsaber hilt, but he didn't draw it yet. Not Sith, not even dark side exactly. It's like nothing. A void walking. Should we run? Hera asked pragmatically. The Ghost could be airborne in 30 seconds. Too late, Kanan said quietly. It's here. Sung Jin Woo materialized from the shadows at the base of the Ghost's boarding ramp. He didn't decloak. There was no shimmering transition from invisible to visible. One moment the ramp was empty. The next, he was standing there, as if he'd simply stepped out of a shadow that shouldn't have existed. Behind him, the Shadow Fifth Brother emerged, its dark form immediately recognizable even in its transformed state. Inside the Ghost, Sabine Wren's curse was audible even through the hull. That's a criffing Inquisitor. Hold fire, Kanan ordered, though his own tension was palpable. The Force was giving him conflicting readings. The Inquisitor registered as wrong. Dead, but not dead. Present, but absent. And the figure in front of it. The Force showed Kanan nothing, as if Jin Woo simply didn't exist in the cosmic web that connected all living things. You're the rebels, Jin Woo said in perfect galactic basic, his tone matter-of-fact rather than questioning. The ones fighting the Empire. The Ghost's boarding ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. Kanan descended slowly, his hand still on his lightsaber. Up close, the wrongness was even more pronounced. This man, human by all appearances, had no presence in the Force whatsoever. But the power radiating from him was undeniable. A pressure that had nothing to do with the mystical energy field Kanan had trained his entire life to sense. Who are you? Kanan demanded. And what did you do to that Inquisitor? I killed him, Jin Woo said simply. Then I made him mine, along with 45 stormtroopers and everyone else the Empire has sent after me in the past 3 days. Kanan's blood ran cold. You're raising the dead. I'm giving them purpose. Jin Woo's purple eyes swept over the ghost, cataloging its capabilities with the same analytical precision he'd applied to the Empire's forces. Your ship, 4 crew members currently aboard. Light armament designed for fast insertion and extraction. You've been conducting guerrilla operations against Imperial supply lines for approximately 1 standard year. Success rate, 63%. Casualties inflicted on Imperial forces, minimal. Strategic impact, negligible. Hera's voice crackled over Kanan's comlink. How does he know our operational history? The fifth brother's memories, Jin Woo explained, having heard the question through his enhanced senses. Your cell was on his watch list. Low priority, but documented. The Empire knows everything about you except your next target. Kanan's hand tightened on his lightsaber. If you're here to eliminate us, I'm here to offer you a choice, Jin Woo interrupted. The Empire is hunting me. Within 24 hours, they'll send more Inquisitors, possibly Vader himself. When they arrive, they'll assume you're allied with me. After all, I'm standing at your ship. Your options are, flee Lothal immediately, try to convince the Empire of your innocence, which won't work, or accept that. You're already committed to my side, whether you like it or not. Kanan stared at him. That's not an offer. That's a threat. It's reality, Jin Woo corrected. I don't care if you join me or not. I'm not recruiting. I'm informing you of the tactical situation so you can make an educated decision about your survival. And if we choose to fight you instead. Kanan's lightsaber finally left its holster, the blade igniting with a distinctive snap hiss. The blue plasma cast sharp shadows across Jin Woo's impassive face. Jin Woo looked at the lightsaber with mild interest. Then you'll die. I'll raise your shadows, and I'll continue alone. You seem competent enough that I'd prefer to avoid the hassle, but I've rebuilt from nothing before. 4 more bodies won't significantly impact my plans. The absolute cold pragmatism of that statement hit harder than any threat. This wasn't a Sith Lord reveling in power or an Imperial officer drunk on authority. This was someone who'd calculated the value of their lives, found them wanting, and was prepared to kill them with no more emotion than one might swat an insect. Kanan had faced Sith. He'd survived Order 66. He'd fought Inquisitors and lived to tell about it. But he'd never encountered someone who looked at death, his death specifically, with such complete indifference. Kanan? Hera's voice was tight. Sensors are picking up Imperial movements. Lots of them. Star Destroyer just entered high orbit. They're launching TIE squadrons. Jin Woo tilted his head, his own detection skill confirming the same information. That would be the response to the fifth brother's death. They're fast. I'm impressed. He turned his attention back to Kanan. So, what's your decision? I can offer protection. The Empire's forces can't touch you while you're under my aegis. In exchange, you provide intelligence on rebel operations and help me understand the political landscape. Or you can try to run and hope the Empire believes you weren't involved. And if we refuse both options? Kanan asked, though he already knew the answer. Then we're enemies, and I'll deal with you accordingly. Jin Woo's expression didn't change, but I'd advise against it. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and judging from your force signature, you're barely trained. A Padawan who survived the purge through luck and hiding. Admirable, but insufficient against what's coming. Kanan's face flushed with anger at the casual dismissal of his abilities. You don't know anything about me. I know you're afraid. Jin Woo said quietly, and suddenly his purple eyes were boring into Kanan's with an intensity that made the Jedi's breath catch. Afraid of revealing yourself, afraid of training your Padawan properly because it might draw attention, afraid that one day the Empire will find you and you won't be strong enough to protect the people you care about. I know because I've seen that fear before, in myself before I became strong enough that fear became irrelevant. The words hit like physical blows. Every insecurity Kanan had buried, every nightmare about failing his crew, every moment of doubt about whether he was qualified to train Ezra. This stranger had seen through all of it in seconds. "The Empire is coming," Jin Woo continued, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "Not just to this city, but to this planet. They'll burn everything looking for me. Your rebels will be collateral damage unless you're under my protection. So I'll ask one more time. Are you with me, or should I leave you to face them alone?" Kanan stood frozen, the weight of the decision crushing down on him. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that allying with someone who raised the dead was a betrayal of everything the Jedi stood for. But his pragmatic side, the part that had kept him alive for 14 years, understood the math. The Empire was coming. The Spectres couldn't fight a Star Destroyer. And this stranger had killed an Inquisitor like it was nothing. "Kanan," Hera said over the comlink. "TIE fighters incoming. We need to decide now." Kanan looked at Jin Woo, at the Shadow Inquisitor standing silent behind him, at the impossible power radiating from someone who shouldn't exist. Then he made the hardest decision of his life. "We're with you," Kanan said quietly, deactivating his lightsaber. "For now. But if you betray us, I don't betray allies," Jin Woo said simply. "Betrayal implies broken trust. I'm very clear about my terms." He turned toward the approaching TIE fighters, now visible as dark specks against Lothal's dawn sky. "Get your crew ready to move. We're leaving this location. The Empire wants a war, and I'm going to give them one. But on my terms, not theirs." As the TIE fighters screamed overhead, beginning their attack run, Jin Woo's shadow erupted around him. 50 Shadow stormtroopers materialized from the darkness, taking defensive positions around the Ghost with military precision. The Shadow Fifth Brother's lightsaber blazed to life, its crimson blade ready. And Kanan Jarrus realized, with a sinking certainty, that the Spectres had just allied themselves with something far more dangerous than the Empire they'd been fighting. The question was, would they survive long enough to regret it? The TIE fighters came in fast, 12 of them in tight formation, their distinctive scream echoing across the industrial district. They'd been launched from the Star Destroyer in orbit with a singular mission: investigate the Fifth Brother's last known location and eliminate any threats. Standard Imperial doctrine when an Inquisitor went silent. What they found instead was a nightmare that would be replayed in Imperial tactical briefings for months to come, assuming any of them survived to report it. Jin Woo watched the fighters approach with clinical detachment. TIE fighters. Twin-ion engine craft, highly maneuverable but unshielded. Armament consisted of twin laser cannons capable of punching through light armor, effective against civilian targets and unarmored ships. Against an S-rank hunter? Irrelevant. "Shadow Fifth Brother," Jin Woo said calmly as the first fighter opened fire, green laser bolts streaking toward their position. "Demonstrate your capabilities." The Shadow Inquisitor moved with a speed that shocked even Kanan, who'd seen Force users fight before. One moment it stood beside Jin Woo, the next it was airborne, propelled by Force-enhanced jumps that carried it 30 meters straight up. Its lightsaber became a crimson blur as it intercepted the incoming laser fire, deflecting bolts with impossible precision. But unlike a living Inquisitor, the Shadow didn't tire, didn't hesitate, didn't feel fear or doubt or any emotion that might slow its reactions. It was the fifth brother's combat prowess distilled to pure, relentless efficiency. The Shadow reached the apex of its jump, then thrust out its hand. The Force, twisted through the lens of shadow and death, seized the lead TIE fighter and crushed it like a tin can. Metal screamed. The viewport imploded. The pilot's death was instantaneous as atmospheric pressure differential pulped his body. The wreckage fell smoking to the ground as the Shadow fifth brother landed gracefully, already moving, toward the next target. Karabast. Sabine breathed from the Ghost's dorsal gun turret. Did that thing just... Yes, Kanan said tightly, watching the Shadow Inquisitor tear through another TIE fighter with casual brutality. It retained Force abilities, which should be impossible. The dead don't have midi-chlorians. They can't connect to the Force. Your Force, Jin Woo corrected, not looking away from the battle. Your galaxy's mystical energy field. My shadows operate on different principles. They're not alive, so they don't need your biological organisms. They simply are. The remaining TIE fighters broke formation, their pilots smart enough to recognize when they were catastrophically outmatched. They scattered, trying to gain altitude and distance for a coordinated strike. Standard TIE fighter tactics when facing a Force user on the ground. Spread out, use superior speed and numbers to overwhelm the target. Jin Woo raised both hands. Ruler's authority. All 10 TIE fighters stopped mid-flight. Their engines still screamed, thrusters still fired, but they hung motionless in the air as if caught in an invisible fist. The pilot's panicked chatter filled the comm channels. Controls non-responsive. Something's grabbed us. I can't break free. Jin Woo's hands clenched into fists, and the invisible pressure intensified. Metal groaned, viewports cracked. The TIE fighters began to crumple inward, their lightweight frames never designed to withstand omnidirectional force. Magnificent, Jin Woo murmured, studying the effect of his telekinesis on the alien technology. Your vehicles are more fragile than I expected, designed for speed over durability. He squeezed harder. 10 TIE fighters imploded simultaneously. Metal folded in on itself. Pilots died screaming as their cockpits became coffins. The wrecks fell from the sky like broken toys, impacting the ground in sequence, boom, 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 each explosion painting the morning orange with burning fuel. Silence fell across the industrial district, broken only by the crackle of flames and the distant wail of Imperial sirens. Kanan stared at the devastation, his mind struggling to process what he'd just witnessed. 12 TIE fighters, 12 trained Imperial pilots, dead in less than 60 seconds, killed by one man who hadn't even moved from his position. This is what you're bringing to our fight? Hera asked over the comlink, her voice carefully neutral. This kind of power? This is restraint, Jin Woo said simply. If I wanted to, I could level this city in an hour, raise every corpse in every graveyard, march an army of 10,000 shadows through Imperial lines and leave nothing alive. He turned to look at the Ghost, at the rebels watching from various positions. But I don't conquer through annihilation. I conquer through strategy. The Empire needs to see me as a threat, not as an extinction-level event. Not yet. Not yet, Kanan repeated, his stomach turning. Meaning, eventually. Meaning, I'll do whatever is necessary to achieve my goals, Jin Woo interrupted. Right now, those goals align with yours. Reduce Imperial presence on Lothal, disrupt their operations, and survive long enough to understand this galaxy's power structure. If that changes, he shrugged, you'll be informed. It was the most terrifying non-threat Kanan had ever heard. This wasn't a villain monologue or a Sith Lord's arrogant boast. This was a simple statement of fact from someone who genuinely didn't care about morality or consequences, only results. "We need to move," Jin Woo continued, his detection skill painting a clear picture of incoming Imperial forces. "That Star Destroyer is deploying ground troops, AT-AT walkers, several companies of stormtroopers, and at least 3 more Inquisitors. They're taking this seriously now." 3 Inquisitors? Kanan's blood ran cold. The Spectres had barely survived encounters with single Inquisitors. 3 at once, backed by Imperial military might. Yes. The 7th sister, the 8th brother, and leading them? Jin Woo's eyes narrowed fractionally. Someone stronger. The Grand Inquisitor, according to the 5th brother's memories, former Jedi Temple Guard, trained in all 7 forms of lightsaber combat, genuinely dangerous. "You sound almost pleased," Sabine observed from her turret. "I am," Jin Woo admitted. The 5th brother was disappointing, too arrogant, too reliant on the Force to compensate for mediocre technique. If this Grand Inquisitor is truly skilled, he might actually provide useful data on upper-tier Force combat capabilities. "Data," Kanan said flatly. "You're talking about a fight that could kill all of us, and you're treating it like a research opportunity." Jin Woo looked at him with genuine confusion. "How else would I treat it? I've survived encounters with monarchs who could reshape reality, with dragons that breathed dimensional fire, with demons that existed in 4 dimensions simultaneously. Your Inquisitors are dangerous relative to your galaxy's baseline, but to me?" He shook his head. "They're test subjects, ways to measure how this Force compares to the powers I've already mastered." The casual dismissal of beings that haunted Kanan's nightmares was somehow worse than any threat. This wasn't arrogance. Jin Woo genuinely believed what he was saying, and given what Kanan had just witnessed, he might be right. "So, what's your plan?" Hera asked, bringing the conversation back to practical matters. "We can't fight a Star Destroyer and multiple Inquisitors with 1 light freighter and your Shadow Army." "We don't fight them here," Jin Woo said. "We lead them somewhere that advantages us. Your ship, it's fast?" "Fastest in the sector," Hera said with pride. "Good. We're going to use it as bait." Jin Woo's tactical mind was already working through scenarios, calculating angles and probabilities. "The Empire wants me. They'll follow wherever I go. We lead them away from population centers, into terrain where their numbers matter less and my shadows can operate effectively." "The canyons," Kanan said, understanding dawning. "The Lothal Mesa canyons. Narrow passages, lots of cover, difficult for AT-ATs to navigate." "Perfect," Jin Woo agreed. "The Inquisitors will pursue on foot, separated from their supporting forces. We engage them in terrain that negates their numerical advantage." He turned to his Shadow Army, which had remained motionless throughout the conversation. "Shadow 5th brother, return to my shadow. The rest of you, spread out. Begin extracting Imperial patrols throughout the city. Quietly. No witnesses. I want 300 Shadow soldiers by nightfall." The shadows dissolved into black smoke, flowing back into Jin Woo's darkness like water finding its level. Only Jin Woo remained, standing alone in the center of the destruction he'd created. 300 soldiers, Kanan said slowly. "In 1 day. You're planning to raise an entire army from every Imperial soldier on Lothal, eventually," Jin Woo confirmed. "This planet has approximately 15,000 Imperial military personnel. Within a week, most of them will serve me. Within a month, the Empire will have lost complete control of this world." "And the civilians?" Hera demanded. "The people who live here. What happens to them when you turn Lothal into a war zone? Jin Woo met her gaze evenly. They'll be safer under my control than under Imperial occupation. I don't enslave populations. I don't extract resources or conscript soldiers. I eliminate threats and establish order. Once the Empire is driven from Lothal, the people can govern themselves however they choose. Until you decide otherwise, Kanan said quietly. Until I decide otherwise, Jin Woo agreed without hesitation. I'm not offering democracy or freedom or any other idealistic concept. I'm offering protection from a tyrannical empire and the chance to live without fear of arbitrary execution, if that's not enough. He shrugged. There are other planets. Hera and Kanan exchanged glances. Everything about this alliance felt wrong. The raising of the dead, the casual discussion of conquest, the complete absence of ideological commitment. They'd spent years fighting for the rebellion because they believed in freedom, in justice, in the idea that the galaxy could be better. This man believed in nothing except his own power and the order he could impose through it. But the Empire was coming. The Star Destroyer's shadow was already visible against Lothal's dawn sky, a gray dagger descending toward their position. In minutes, they'd be surrounded by overwhelming force. We'll take you to the canyons, Hera said finally. But after this is over, we're having a serious conversation about what kind of protection you're actually offering. Fair enough, Jin Woo said, already moving toward the Ghost's boarding ramp. Though I suspect you'll find my methods more acceptable once you see the alternative. As the crew scrambled to launch positions and the Ghost's engines roared to life, Kanan took one last look at the burning TIE fighter wrecks. 12 pilots dead. An Inquisitor turned into an undead servant. An entire Imperial strike force wiped out in minutes. And this was Jin Woo showing restraint. Kanan activated his comlink to Ezra, who'd been suspiciously quiet during the entire encounter. Ezra, I need you to stay sharp. Something's happened. Something that changes everything. I know. Ezra's voice came back, tight with tension. I felt it through the Force. Something cold. Something that shouldn't exist. Kanan, what is that thing? Kanan looked at Jin Woo, who stood calmly in the Ghost's cargo hold as the ship lifted off, his purple eyes watching the approaching Imperial forces with analytical interest rather than fear or excitement. I don't know, Kanan admitted, but I think we just made a deal with something that might be worse than the Empire. Or better, Hera added quietly over the comm. We'll find out soon enough. The Ghost accelerated toward the Mesa Canyons, leaving the burning industrial district behind. Behind them, 3 Imperial Inquisitors and a company of stormtroopers landed in the devastation. Their orders clear. Find the entity responsible for the 5th brother's death and eliminate it with extreme prejudice. They had no idea they were walking into a trap set by someone who'd spent 10 years turning overwhelming odds into inevitable victories. The hunt had begun, but the Empire had made a critical error in their threat assessment. They thought they were the hunters. They were wrong. 60 kilometers away, in the command throne of the Imperial Star Destroyer Lawgiver, Grand Inquisitor Pawan stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Yellow eyes fixed on the tactical display, the reports streaming in from the surface were disturbing. 12 TIE fighters destroyed, the 5th brother confirmed dead, and a single hostile entity demonstrating capabilities that didn't match any known Force user profile. Not a Jedi, he murmured, his voice like gravel sliding down a metal chute. No Force signature, yet power enough to kill an Inquisitor and destroy an entire squadron. Interesting. Beside him, the 7th sister shifted impatiently. We should orbital strike the entire sector. Burn it clean and... No, the Grand Inquisitor said firmly. The Emperor's orders were explicit. Capture if possible, study the entity's capabilities, determine if it can be turned or weaponized. Only eliminate if capture proves impossible. And if it kills us like it killed the fifth brother? The eighth brother asked nervously. The Grand Inquisitor's thin lips curved into something that might have been a smile. Then we'll have learned something valuable about its limitations. Either way, the Emperor gains knowledge. He turned from the viewport, his elongated features cast in shadow. Prepare a full assault team. I want overwhelming force. Enough to corner this entity, but not so much that it feels the need to flee. We're going hunting. As the Inquisitors departed to gather their forces, the Grand Inquisitor remained alone, reaching out through the Force to sense the disturbance on Lothal's surface. He felt nothing, an absence where something should exist, a hole in the Force that his senses simply slid past. It reminded him of something he'd read in the Jedi archives, long ago before Order 66. Ancient texts mentioning beings from outside, creatures that existed independent of the Force. The Jedi Masters had dismissed such writings as mythology, impossible given the Force's omnipresence. Perhaps the Masters had been wrong. The Grand Inquisitor's smile widened. After 14 years of hunting frightened Padawans and broken Jedi Knights, finally something interesting had appeared. Something that might actually pose a challenge. Let's see what you truly are, he whispered to the void where Jin Woo's presence should have been. And whether you're worth the Emperor's attention. The pieces were moving. The trap was set. And in the Lothal Mesa Canyons, Sung Jin Woo was preparing to show the Empire exactly what kind of enemy they'd made. The Lothal Mesa Canyon stretched for hundreds of kilometers across the planet's western hemisphere. Towering formations of red and orange rock carved by millennia of wind and rare rainfall. The passages between the mesas were narrow, winding, and treacherous, perfect for ambushes and guerrilla tactics. The Spectres had used them before to escape Imperial patrols, relying on Hera's piloting skills to navigate passages too tight for TIE fighters to follow. Now, as the Ghost settled onto a flat outcropping deep within the canyon system, those same narrow passages would serve a different purpose. A killing ground where numbers meant nothing and the Empire's tactical advantages would evaporate like water in Tatooine's twin suns. Jin Woo stood at the canyon's edge, his detection skill painting a three-dimensional map of the surrounding terrain in his mind. The passages twisted and turned, creating blind corners and choke points. The walls rose 50 meters on average, too high for conventional troops to scale, but easily managed by Force users with enhanced jumping capabilities. They'll come from the air initially, Jin Woo said, speaking more to himself than the rebels watching him nervously. Inquisitors can fly using the Force or their lightsaber rotors. They'll try to establish aerial superiority, force us into defensive positions. His eyes narrowed. Which means we need to ground them immediately. And how do you plan to do that? Kanan asked. He'd been watching Jin Woo since they'd landed, trying to understand this being who'd inserted himself into their rebellion. Everything about Jin Woo was wrong. Not evil, exactly, but fundamentally alien. He moved with predatory efficiency, spoke without emotional inflection, and treated combat scenarios like mathematical problems to be solved. Shadow Fifth Brother, Jin Woo said, and the Shadow Inquisitor materialized from his darkness. You know how Inquisitors fight, their tactics, their formations, their preferred attack patterns. Yes, Master. The Shadow's hollow voice carried certainty. Standard protocol for multiple Inquisitors is triangulation. They'll approach from 3 vectors, using Force enhancement to move quickly through the canyons. The Grand Inquisitor will take the central path. He prefers direct confrontation. The seventh sister will flank left, using her probe droids for reconnaissance. The eighth brother will take right, relying on brute force over finesse. Predictable, Jin Woo observed. What about their supporting forces? Stormtroopers will follow on foot, establishing a perimeter to prevent escape. AT-ST walkers if the terrain allows. They'll try to trap you between the Inquisitors' advance and the military cordon. The Shadow paused. The Grand Inquisitor is cautious. He won't commit fully until he understands your capabilities. Jin Woo nodded slowly, his tactical mind already formulating the engagement strategy. Then we give him a show, something that demonstrates power but not full capacity. Make him think he can win if he commits everything. You're going to let him think he has a chance, Kanan said, understanding dawning. So he brings his entire force into the canyons. Exactly. Jin Woo turned to face the rebels. Your job is simple. Stay alive and look threatening. The Empire needs to believe you're part of my operation, that you represent a legitimate rebel presence working with an unknown asset. Fire your weapons, make noise, but don't engage the Inquisitors directly. Leave them to me. And if something goes wrong? Hera asked. If this Grand Inquisitor is stronger than you expect? Jin Woo's expression didn't change. Then I'll adapt. I've fought enemies who could manipulate time, who could attack from 4 dimensions simultaneously, who commanded powers that rewrote physical laws. An enhanced force user with precognition and a plasma sword? He shook his head fractionally. He's dangerous, but not unprecedented. Ezra, who'd been silent since boarding the Ghost, finally spoke up. His young voice carried an edge of fear. The Force is screaming warnings about you. Every time I try to sense your intentions, I get nothing. It's like you're a black hole where a person should be. How is that possible? Jin Woo looked at the young Padawan with something approaching curiosity. You're force sensitive, untrained, barely able to control your abilities, but genuinely connected to this mystical energy field. He tilted his head. Tell me, when you sense a rock or a droid, what do you feel? Nothing, Ezra said, confused. They're not alive. They don't have a presence in the Force. Exactly. I'm not from your galaxy. I don't have your midi-chlorians. I exist outside your Force entirely, powered by a completely different dimensional energy. Jin Woo's eyes glowed faintly purple. To your senses, I'm functionally equivalent to an inanimate object that happens to walk and talk and kill Inquisitors. Disturbing, I'm sure, but not actually hostile. Not hostile, Sabine muttered from where she was checking her weapons. Right. The guy who raises armies of the dead and crushes TIE fighters like tin cans is not hostile. Hostile implies malicious intent, Jin Woo corrected. I have no desire to harm you or your rebellion. You're useful allies and potentially valuable intelligence assets. As long as that remains true, you're under my protection. His tone made it clear that the inverse was also true. The moment they ceased being useful, his protection would evaporate. Kanan was about to respond when his Force senses flared a warning. They're here. Jin Woo's detection skill confirmed it simultaneously. 3 signatures moving through the canyons at enhanced speed, their Force presences blazing like beacons to anyone who could sense them. Behind them, approximately 200 stormtroopers advanced in standard formation, establishing perimeter positions at canyon junctions. Positions! Jin Woo ordered. His shadow army erupted from his darkness. Not all of them, just enough to make a convincing show of force. 50 shadow stormtroopers took defensive positions along the canyon walls, their weapons trained on the approach vectors. The shadow 5th brother moved to Jin Woo's right, lightsaber ignited, a crimson warning to the incoming Inquisitors. The Spectres scrambled to their own positions. Hera took the Ghost airborne, keeping it in a hover pattern above the canyon with weapons hot. Sabine positioned herself on a high outcropping with her customized blaster rifle. Kanan and Ezra stood near Jin Woo, lightsabers ready despite his instructions not to engage directly. They didn't have to wait long. The Grand Inquisitor arrived first, landing on a rock formation 30 meters from Jin Woo's position with inhuman grace. He was tall and gaunt, his gray skin stretched tight over sharp features. His eyes burned yellow with Sith corruption, and his double-bladed lightsaber spun in his hands with casual menace. A ring of red plasma death that had killed more Jedi than any other Inquisitor. "You are the one who killed the fifth brother," the Grand Inquisitor said, his voice carrying across the canyon. It wasn't a question. "I am," Jin Woo confirmed. The seventh sister landed to the left, a Mirialan female with cold intelligence in her yellow eyes and a pair of probe droids hovering at her shoulders. The eighth brother took the right position. A Torellian Django jumper, massive and brutish, his lightsaber held in a two-handed grip. Classic triangulation, exactly as the Shadow fifth brother had predicted. "Curious," the Grand Inquisitor continued, studying Jin Woo with the analytical gaze of a former Jedi. "I sense no Force presence from you, yet you command power enough to kill an Inquisitor. How?" "Does it matter?" Jin Woo asked. "You're here to kill or capture me. My power source is irrelevant to that objective." "On the contrary." The Grand Inquisitor's lightsaber stopped spinning, both blades extending to full length. "Understanding an enemy's capabilities is the foundation of victory. The Emperor taught me that personally." His eyes flickered to the Shadow fifth brother. "And that abomination. You've raised his corpse as some kind of puppet. Necromancy, a dark art even the Sith considered too dangerous." "Not necromancy," Jin Woo corrected. "Transformation. I don't raise mindless corpses. I create loyal soldiers who retain their skills and knowledge. The fifth brother serves me better now than he ever served your empire." The Grand Inquisitor's expression tightened. For a former Jedi, the concept of defiling the dead was anathema, a violation of the natural order that even his fall to the dark side hadn't prepared him to accept. "You will not have the opportunity to desecrate more Imperial servants. Inquisitors, kill the entity. Capture the rebels for interrogation." The three Inquisitors moved, simultaneously, their force-enhanced speed carrying them across the gap in coordinated strikes. The seventh sister's probe droids shrieked and dove toward Jin Woo's position, their electroshock prods crackling. The eighth brother came straight ahead, his massive frame powered by raw strength, and the Grand Inquisitor circled high, using force-propelled leaps to gain aerial advantage. Jin Woo didn't move. His shadow army opened fire first, 50 blaster rifles discharging in synchronized volleys. The red plasma bolts converged on the Inquisitors from multiple angles, a coordinated barrage that would have shredded any normal targets. The Inquisitors deflected the bolts casually, their lightsabers moving in defensive patterns that redirected plasma harmlessly into the canyon walls. Standard Jedi technique, Form 3 Soresu, designed specifically to counter blaster fire, which was exactly what Jin Woo had expected. Ruler's authority. The invisible telekinetic force seized all three Inquisitors mid-movement, stopping them as completely as it had stopped the TIE fighters. The seventh sister gasped, her probe droids falling from the sky as her concentration broke. The eighth brother roared in fury, his muscles straining against the invisible grip. The Grand Inquisitor's eyes widened in genuine shock. In 40 years of Force training, He'd never encountered telekinesis this powerful or this absolute. Impossible, the Grand Inquisitor managed, calling on the Force to break free. Dark side energy surged through him, raw power that had crushed durasteel and shattered stone. The invisible grip loosened, fractionally, just enough for him to move his lightsaber arm a few centimeters. Jin Woo's eyes narrowed with interest. So the Force can resist ruler's authority? Not completely, but enough to matter. Good to know. He released the telekinetic hold and moved. The Grand Inquisitor barely registered the blur of motion before Jin Woo was on him, moving with S-rank, speed that made even Force-enhanced reflexes look sluggish. A dagger materialized in Jin Woo's hand, black metal that seemed to drink in light, and carved toward the Inquisitor's throat. The Grand Inquisitor's precognition saved him. He saw the strike a fraction of a second before it landed and threw himself backward, his double-bladed lightsaber coming up in a desperate parry. Jin Woo's dagger met the lightsaber blade and didn't vaporize. The Grand Inquisitor stared in disbelief as the black dagger, which should have been severed instantly by plasma hot enough to cut through starship hulls, held firm against his lightsaber. Sparks flew. The lightsaber's characteristic hum became a tortured screech, but the dagger remained intact, its edge actually pushing against the plasma blade. "What kind of metal?" the Grand Inquisitor began. Jin Woo kicked him in the chest. The impact sent the Inquisitor flying 15 meters, crashing through a rock formation and tumbling across the canyon floor. His lightsaber deactivated as his concentration broke, and only decades of combat training allowed him to roll to his feet before Jin Woo's follow-up strike arrived. The seventh sister and eighth brother recovered simultaneously, attacking from both flanks. The seventh sister's lightsaber came in low, aiming for Jin Woo's legs. The eighth brother's overhead strike targeted his head. Perfect coordination, the kind of simultaneous attack that had killed many Jedi during Order 66. Jin Woo vanished. Not invisibly. He simply moved faster than their enhanced senses could track, appearing behind the eighth brother before either Inquisitor could adjust. His dagger found the gap in the eighth brother's armor at the base of his spine, penetrating deep. The eighth brother's roar of pain echoed across the canyon. He spun, lightsaber cutting a wild arc that would have bisected any normal opponent. Jin Woo was already gone, reappearing beside the seventh sister. She brought her lightsaber up in a textbook defensive position, calling on the Force to predict his attack vector. It didn't help. Jin Woo's fist, enhanced by stats that had been refined through countless life-or-death battles, struck her solar plexus with enough force to crack ribs even through her armor. The seventh sister doubled over, gasping, her lightsaber falling from nerveless fingers. Jin Woo caught the weapon before it hit the ground and examined it with clinical curiosity. Interesting design. Plasma contained by a magnetic field, generated by a focusing crystal. Elegant, but the power output is lower than I expected for a weapon capable of cutting through most materials. The seventh sister tried to call the lightsaber back with the Force, but Jin Woo's grip was absolute. He tossed the weapon aside dismissively. "You don't need it anymore." The Shadow Army descended on her. 50 Shadow stormtroopers surged forward in a black wave, their hands grasping, pulling, dragging her down. Seventh sister screamed, calling on the Force to push them back. But for every shadow she destroyed, 2 more took its place. They were already dead. Pain and fear meant nothing to them. Within seconds, she disappeared beneath the tide of shadows. "Sister!" the eighth brother roared, ignoring his wound to charge at Jin Woo with berserker fury. His lightsaber became a crimson blur, executing a Form 5 gem so power attack that could shatter stone. Jin Woo blocked the strike with his dagger, then stepped inside the eighth brother's guard and drove his elbow into the Inquisitor's throat. Cartilage crunched. The eighth brother's attack faltered as he gasped for air. Jin Woo's follow-up knee strike to the solar plexus dropped him to the ground, wheezing. Too emotional, Jin Woo observed. Rage makes you predictable. Every attack telegraphed by your killing intent. The Grand Inquisitor watched in horror as his fellow Inquisitors were systematically dismantled. 14 years of hunting. Jedi had made him arrogant, secure in his superiority. He'd forgotten what it felt like to be completely outmatched. Now he remembered. "All units, converge on my position," the Grand Inquisitor shouted into his comlink. "I want orbital strikes on these coordinates in 30 seconds. Jin Woo's hand shot out, and Ruler's authority crushed the comlink to powder. No orbital strikes, no reinforcements. Just you and me, Inquisitor. Let's see if your grand title is earned or merely decorative." The Grand Inquisitor's face twisted with rage and fear. He reached deep into the dark side, drawing on reserves of power he'd cultivated over decades. His lightsaber ignited again, spinning in the advanced Form 7 Juyo pattern that had killed a dozen Jedi Masters. He launched himself at Jin Woo with everything he had: speed, strength, precognition, and 40 years of combat experience channeled into a single killing strike. Jin Woo caught his lightsaber blade with his bare hand. The Grand Inquisitor's world stopped. The plasma blade, hot enough to vaporize flesh, sharp enough to cut through nearly anything, pressed against Jin Woo's palm and didn't penetrate, didn't burn, didn't even leave a mark. "How?" the Grand Inquisitor whispered. "My body was reconstructed at the cellular level when I became the Shadow Monarch," Jin Woo explained calmly. "Durability increased by orders of magnitude. Your weapon is impressive by galactic standards, but compared to what I've endured..." He squeezed, and the lightsaber's blade flickered. "Insufficient." The crystal inside the lightsaber cracked under the pressure. The blade sputtered and died. The Grand Inquisitor stood frozen, holding a useless hilt, facing an enemy he couldn't hurt, couldn't outrun, and couldn't understand. For the first time since becoming an Inquisitor, he felt the same helpless terror he'd once seen in the eyes of the Jedi he'd hunted. "You were supposed to be the best," Jin Woo said, releasing the broken lightsaber. "The Grand Inquisitor, former Jedi Temple Guard, master of all 7 combat forms, the Emperor's finest hunter." His purple eyes bored into the Inquisitor's yellow ones. "But you've spent 14 years killing frightened survivors and undertrained Padawans. You've forgotten what it means to fight someone truly dangerous." The Grand Inquisitor tried to run, tried to call the Force to propel him away, to escape this nightmare. Jin Woo's hand closed around his throat, lifting him off the ground with casual strength. "I'm going to give you a choice," Jin Woo said. "The same choice I gave your 5th brother. Serve me willingly, retain your sense of self and your memories, become a valued commander in my army. Or resist, and I'll extract your shadow by force. Either way, you're mine. The only question is whether you want to maintain your identity." The Grand Inquisitor's pride warred with his survival instinct. He'd spent 40 years serving, first the Jedi, then the Empire, always bending knee to someone stronger. The thought of doing it again, of serving this entity that shouldn't exist, was galling beyond measure. But the alternative was death. Worse than death, transformation into a mindless puppet. The Grand Inquisitor gasped for air. "I will serve." Jin Woo's grip loosened slightly. "Swear it, by whatever you hold sacred." "I swear by the dark side itself," the Grand Inquisitor forced out. "I will serve you, Shadow Monarch, in exchange for my continued existence." Jin Woo studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Acceptable." He released the Inquisitor, who collapsed to his knees. You'll retain your title and your command authority, but your loyalty is now to me, not the Empire. Betray me, and death will be a mercy I won't grant." As the Grand Inquisitor knelt in submission, the shadows surrounding the Seventh Sister's body rose triumphantly. The female Inquisitor was dead, her life force extinguished in the brutal assault. Jin Woo gestured, and her corpse floated toward him through the air, suspended by ruler's authority. Arise. The Seventh Sister's shadow extracted cleanly, rising as a dark mirror of her former self. Her yellow eyes now glowed purple, and her lightsaber, recovered from where Jin Woo had thrown it, ignited in her spectral hand. The eighth brother, still gasping on the ground, watched in horror as his sister Inquisitor was transformed. Jin Woo looked down at him with clinical detachment. "You have the same choice, serve or die." The eighth brother's submission was immediate. I serve, just don't." "Accepted," Jin Woo said, cutting off the groveling. He turned to address all three surviving Inquisitors and one shadow. "You are now the vanguard of my military force. You will use your Imperial access to feed me intelligence, sabotage operations, and identify high-value targets. In exchange, I will grant you power beyond what the Empire ever offered." From the ghost, Kanan watched the tableau with sick fascination. 3 Inquisitors, beings that had haunted his nightmares for 14 years, had been defeated in less than 5 minutes. 2 now served Jin Woo through fear. 1 had been raised as an undead servant. The ease of the victory was more terrifying than any display of raw power could have been. "This is what we've allied with," Kanan said quietly to Hera. "Something that can break Inquisitors like they're nothing." "The question is," Hera responded, "what does that make us?" Neither had an answer. The Imperial Star Destroyer Lawgiver hung in geosynchronous orbit above Lothal, its bridge crew frantically trying to re-establish contact with the Inquisitor strike team. For the past 17 minutes, all communications from the canyon sector had gone dark. No status updates, no emergency beacons, just silence that grew heavier with each passing second. Captain Brunson stood at the tactical display, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. "Still nothing?" "No, sir," the communications officer reported, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Last transmission was the Grand Inquisitor ordering orbital strikes, then complete communications blackout. All comlinks dead. Even the stormtrooper squad beacons have gone offline. Brunson's stomach twisted. In his 20 years of Imperial service, he'd seen many operations go wrong. Equipment failures, rebel ambushes, even Force user conflicts that ended badly. But total communications loss from 3 Inquisitors and 200 troops? That suggested something catastrophic. "Dispatch reconnaissance ties," Brunson ordered. "Visual confirmation on the canyon coordinates, and prepare the ventral batteries for precision orbital strike." Belay that order. Every head on the bridge turned as a new presence made itself known. Not physically. The figure was still in hyperspace, hours away from Lothal. But through the Force, a suffocating pressure that made even non-sensitive crew members feel like the air had grown thick and hard to breathe. The holographic projector flickered to life, and a massive figure materialized above the tactical display. Black armor that gleamed with mechanical precision. A respirator mask that breathed with rhythmic, mechanical menace. A presence in the Force that felt like standing at the edge of an abyss. Darth Vader had joined the conversation. "Lord Vader," Brunson said, snapping to attention despite the hologram's lack of physical presence. "We've lost contact with the Inquisitor strike team. You were about to destroy valuable intelligence through orbital bombardment." Vader's deep mechanical voice cut through Brunson's explanation like a vibroblade. The entity on Lothal's surface is not to be eliminated from orbit. The Emperor wants it studied, understood, if possible, turned. Brunson swallowed hard. Yes, my lord. But the Inquisitors are either dead or compromised, Vader stated with absolute certainty. I sense a disturbance in the Force, unlike anything I have encountered. A void where presence should exist. The Inquisitors would have been inadequate. The slight pause before that last word conveyed volumes of contempt. I am en route. ETA, 4 hours. Maintain orbital position. Deploy no further ground forces. Simply observe. My lord, if the entity attacks Imperial installations while we wait, then the colonists will learn the price of harboring threats to the Empire, Vader said coldly. Your concern should be ensuring I have accurate intelligence when I arrive, Captain, not protecting citizens who allowed this entity to establish a foothold on an Imperial world. The hologram cut out, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Brunson stared at the now empty projector space, processing the implications. Vader was coming personally. The Dark Lord of the Sith, the Emperor's enforcer, the being who'd killed more Jedi than any army. Whatever was happening in those canyons, it was significant enough to warrant his direct intervention. Sir, the communications officer said hesitantly. What are your orders? Brunson took a slow breath. Deploy reconnaissance ties as planned. Visual confirmation only, no engagement. And send a priority message to all Imperial facilities on Lothal. Lockdown protocols in effect. No patrols beyond fortified positions. We're going to sit tight and wait for Lord Vader to clean up this mess. In the Lothal Mesa Canyons, Jin Woo sensed the shift in Imperial strategy immediately. His detection skills showed the TIE fighters approaching from orbit, but they maintained high altitude and made no aggressive moves. Observing, not engaging. Smart. Someone with actual tactical competence had taken command. They're pulling back, Kanan said, his force senses confirming what Jin Woo already knew. That's not standard Imperial doctrine. Usually they just throw more troops at a problem until it goes away. Someone smarter is making decisions now, Jin Woo observed. He turned to the Grand Inquisitor, who knelt nearby with his fellow Inquisitors. The former Jedi's submission had been absolute. Once Jin Woo had demonstrated the futility of resistance, the Grand Inquisitor had calculated that survival through service was preferable to death through defiance. Who commands the Star Destroyer? Captain Brunson, the Grand Inquisitor replied, his voice carefully neutral. Competent but unimaginative. He wouldn't pull back without orders from higher authority. A pause. Lord Vader, it has to be. He's the only one with sufficient authority to override inquisitorious operations. Jin Woo's eyes narrowed fractionally. Tell me about Vader. The Grand Inquisitor's face tightened with something that might have been fear or respect. With Sith, the emotions often intertwined. Darth Vader is beyond classification. I was a Jedi Temple Guard for 20 years. I trained with masters, fought alongside knights, witnessed power that would make ordinary beings weep. Vader eclipses all of it. He gestured at his fellow Inquisitors. We are to him what younglings are to masters. The gap isn't just wide, it's fundamental. He exists on a different level entirely. Specifics, Jin Woo demanded. He can sense Force users across star systems. His telekinesis can crush AT-AT walkers. His lightsaber technique is perfect, a fusion of all 7 forms executed with machine precision. His durability borders on supernatural. I've seen him survive wounds that would kill anyone else. The Grand Inquisitor's voice dropped. And his rage is infinite. He's fueled by pain and hatred so deep that the dark side responds to him like a living thing. Fighting him is like fighting a natural disaster. You don't win. You survive if you're lucky. Jin Woo absorbed this information with his characteristic analytical detachment. The description painted a picture of a high-tier combatant, someone who'd refined their abilities through decades of practice and augmented them with cybernetic enhancements. Dangerous, certainly. Possibly the most dangerous Force user in the galaxy, but not invincible. How long until he arrives? Jin Woo asked. 4 to 6 hours if he's coming from Coruscant, the Grand Inquisitor estimated. Less if he was already in Sector. He'll come alone. Vader doesn't need supporting troops for missions he considers personal. Good. Jin Woo turned to address the assembled group. 3 living Inquisitors, 1 Shadow Inquisitor, 50 Shadow stormtroopers, and the Spectres watching from various positions around the canyon. We have a window. The Empire is in defensive posture, waiting for their champion to arrive. We're going to use that time to consolidate power and send a very specific message. What kind of message? Hera asked warily. Jin Woo's expression was cold and calculating. The kind that makes Vader understand exactly what he's dealing with. Not a rogue Jedi, not a rebel cell. Something entirely outside the Empire's experience. He looked at the Grand Inquisitor. You're going to help me stage a demonstration, one that will be transmitted to every Imperial facility in this sector. The Grand Inquisitor's eyes widened. You want to broadcast a challenge? Jin Woo finished. Vader is coming to eliminate a threat. I'm going to show him that the threat is far greater than the Empire realizes, and that conventional tactics won't work. If he's as intelligent as you suggest, he'll approach cautiously. If he's arrogant, Jin Woo shrugged. Then this will be over quickly. 2 hours later, Imperial facilities across Lothal received an encrypted transmission on Inquisitorious priority channels. The message was brief, but its contents would be analyzed by Imperial intelligence for weeks. The hologram showed the Grand Inquisitor standing in a canyon, his double-bladed lightsaber deactivated, his posture radiating defeat. Behind him stood a figure in black, the entity responsible for the fifth brother's death, flanked by shadow soldiers that moved with unnatural synchronization. This message is for Darth Vader and the Emperor, the Grand Inquisitor said, his voice carefully controlled despite obvious strain. I am Grand Inquisitor Pauan, formerly Master of the Inquisitorious. I have been defeated. The seventh sister is dead and raised as a servant to the entity known as Sung Jin Woo. The eighth brother and I have, chosen to serve rather than die. The hologram shifted focus to Jin Woo, whose purple eyes seemed to pierce through the recording. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute confidence without arrogance. I am Sung Jin Woo, the Shadow Monarch. I did not come to your galaxy by choice. Dimensional accident brought me here. But now that I have arrived, I find your empire's tyranny distasteful, familiar. I have fought and killed beings who called themselves monarchs and rulers, who enslaved entire dimensions to fuel their wars. Your emperor is simply another tyrant wearing a different crown. Jin Woo gestured, and his shadow army manifested behind him. Hundreds of soldiers, all bearing the distinctive armor of Imperial forces, their eyes glowing with purple light. Every soldier you send against me becomes my soldier. Every Force user you dispatch either serves me willingly or rises as my shadow. Your military might is my recruitment pool. Your Inquisitors are my future commanders. Jin Woo's eyes narrowed. I claim Lothal under my protection. Imperial forces have 72 hours to evacuate this world completely. Any who remain after that deadline will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The Grand Inquisitor spoke again, his words clearly scripted, but delivered with conviction. Lord Vader, I advise extreme caution. This entity is not a Force user. Standard tactics are ineffective. His power operates on principles outside the Force entirely. Engaging him directly without understanding his capabilities would be unwise. Jin Woo raised his hand, and the hologram began to distort as his mana interfered with the recording equipment. His final words echoed with supernatural weight. "Come if you must, Darth Vader. I am curious to see if the Empire's champion is worthy of his reputation. But know this: I have conquered death itself. I have commanded armies across dimensions. I am the Shadow Monarch, and your empire is simply the next obstacle to be overcome." The transmission cut out, leaving Imperial commanders across the sector staring at blank screens. On the bridge of the Lawgiver, Captain Brunson replayed the recording 3 times, each viewing making his stomach sink lower. This wasn't a Jedi survivor making desperate threats. This wasn't even a powerful Force user drunk on dark side power. This was something alien and impossibly confident, backed by capabilities that rendered standard military doctrine obsolete. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "the entity is claiming Lothal. If we don't respond..." "We wait for Lord Vader," Brunson interrupted firmly. "That transmission was meant to provoke us into acting rashly. We're not taking the bait." He paused, studying the frozen image of Jin Woo's purple eyes. "Besides, evacuation might not be a bad idea. Whatever that thing is, throwing more troops at it seems counterproductive." In hyperspace, aboard his personal TIE advanced starfighter, Darth Vader received the transmission and watched it in silence. The entity's words washed over him, analyzed and filed away with mechanical efficiency. But it was the feeling behind the words that captured Vader's attention. No fear, no bravado trying to mask uncertainty. Just absolute conviction from someone who'd faced apocalyptic threats and emerged victorious. Vader had spent 20 years crushing rebels, hunting Jedi, and enforcing the Emperor's will through fear and overwhelming power. He'd grown accustomed to the terror his presence inspired, the way even the bravest opponents showed some flicker of doubt when facing him. This entity showed nothing, as if Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, was simply another obstacle to be documented and overcome. It had been years since Vader had felt anything approaching anticipation. The endless parade of broken Jedi and terrified rebels had become monotonous, their defeats inevitable and unsatisfying. But this was different. "Accelerate to maximum velocity," Vader commanded his ship's autopilot. "I want to arrive within 2 hours." The TIE Advanced's engines flared brighter as it pushed beyond normal operating parameters. Vader settled deeper into his meditation chamber, reaching out through the Force to sense the disturbance on Lothal, and found nothing. A void, an absence that shouldn't exist in a universe bound by the Force. For the first time in decades, Darth Vader smiled beneath his mask. Not a smile of pleasure, those were long dead, incinerated on Mustafar along with Anakin Skywalker's capacity for joy. This was a predator's smile, anticipation of a hunt that might actually prove challenging. "Shadow Monarch," Vader murmured, tasting the title. "Let us see if you can withstand the full power of the dark side." In the Lothal canyons, Jin Woo felt the shift in the Force as Vader accelerated toward their position. The disturbance was subtle. The Dark Lord was still hours away. But Jin Woo's detection skill picked up the change in probability vectors, the way future combat scenarios suddenly crystallized around a single point of convergence. "He's coming faster than expected," Jin Woo observed. "Good. I was concerned he might be too cautious to engage directly." Kanan looked at him with barely concealed horror. "You want him to come? You challenged Darth Vader, the most dangerous being in the galaxy, Because you were worried he might be too careful? I need to test the upper limits of Force user capabilities, Jin Woo explained calmly. The Inquisitors provided baseline data. Vader will show me what peak performance looks like. Once I understand that, I can formulate an accurate threat assessment for the Emperor. You're treating this like a research project, Ezra said, his young voice tight with stress. Vader has killed hundreds of Jedi. He's a monster, and you're acting like he's just data to collect. Jin Woo looked at the boy with something that might have been sympathy. I've fought monsters that would make Vader seem like a training exercise. Dragons that breathed dimensional fire. Demons that existed partially outside space-time. A monarch who could manipulate the concept of destruction itself. His purple eyes glowed brighter. Vader is dangerous, possibly the most dangerous Force user alive. But he's not unprecedented, he's not unbeatable. He's just another obstacle. The Grand Inquisitor, listening to this exchange, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the canyon's temperature. This entity truly believed what it was saying. Not arrogant bravado, not false confidence. Genuine, absolute certainty that Darth Vader was simply another enemy to be analyzed and defeated. Either the Shadow Monarch was delusional, or the galaxy was about to witness something that would fundamentally alter the balance of power. The Grand Inquisitor wasn't sure which possibility terrified him more. Prepare yourselves, Jin Woo said, addressing everyone present. When Vader arrives, stay out of the combat zone. This fight will be intense. Collateral damage is likely. And if he kills you? Hera asked bluntly. Jin Woo's expression didn't change. Then you should run very, very fast. Because if Vader is powerful enough to kill me, the rebellion has no chance whatsoever. He paused. But I don't die easily. The last time someone tried, I killed him, consumed his power, and became the Shadow Monarch. Vader should be prepared for a similar outcome. With that ominous statement, Jin Woo walked to the center of the canyon and sat down cross-legged, entering meditation. His shadow army surrounded him in concentric circles, first the Shadow Stormtroopers, then the Shadow Seventh Sister, then the living Inquisitors who'd sworn allegiance. A formation designed not for defense, but for theater. Vader wanted a confrontation with the Shadow Monarch. Jin Woo would give him one he'd never forget. Darth Vader's TIE advanced screamed through Lothal's atmosphere like a black knife cutting through clouds. He'd pushed the ship beyond its recommended operational limits, driven by something he hadn't felt in years, genuine curiosity mixed with anticipation. The Force swirled around him, offering glimpses of possible futures, all of them obscured by that strange void where the entity called Jin Woo should register. As his ship descended toward the canyon coordinates, Vader reached out through the Force with focused intensity. Not to sense Jin Woo directly, that had proven impossible, but to read the currents around the void. The way water revealed the shape of an obstacle by flowing around it. What he sensed made him pause. 3 Inquisitors, their Force signatures bent in submission. Hundreds of lesser presences that flickered wrongly, alive but not alive. Present but absent. And beneath it all, that yawning emptiness that made even Vader's corrupted connection to the Force recoil instinctively. Interesting, Vader murmured, his mechanical respirator punctuating the word with its rhythmic breathing. The Grand Inquisitor was not exaggerating. The TIE advanced, landed with repulsor cushioned precision on a flat outcropping overlooking the canyon floor. Vader emerged from the cockpit, his black armor gleaming in Lothal's afternoon sun, his cape billowing in the wind. He stood for a moment, surveying the scene below, with both his cybernetic eyes and his Force perception. The canyon had been transformed into a fortress. Shadow soldiers lined the walls in perfect formation, their glowing purple eyes tracking his descent. The three Inquisitors knelt in a semicircle, their postures radiating defeat and submission. And in the center of it all, sitting cross-legged in meditation, was the entity responsible. Sung Jin Woo looked up as Vader descended, using the Force to slow his fall from the outcropping to the canyon floor. Their eyes met across 30 meters of open space. Vader's yellow Sith eyes behind his mask's lenses, Jin Woo's purple gaze that seemed to pierce through armor and flesh to measure the man beneath. "Darth Vader?" Jin Woo said, rising smoothly to his feet. "The Dark Lord of the Sith, the Emperor's enforcer, the terror of the Jedi Order." He tilted his head fractionally. "You're taller than the memory suggested." "You have made a grave miscalculation," Vader said, his deep mechanical voice carrying across the canyon. "Challenging the Empire, claiming Imperial worlds, corrupting my Inquisitors." His hand moved to his lightsaber. "Your arrogance will be your undoing." "Not arrogance," Jin Woo corrected calmly. "Assessment. I've analyzed the Empire's capabilities through the memories of your fallen soldiers. I've tested Force user abilities through combat with your Inquisitors. I've studied your tactics, your weapons, your strategic doctrine." His purple eyes glowed brighter. "You're strong, Vader. Possibly the strongest Force user I'll encounter in this galaxy. But strength alone has never been enough to defeat me." Vader's response was to ignite his lightsaber. The crimson blade sprang to life with that distinctive snap hiss, casting red light across his black armor. The sound alone had made countless Jedi freeze in terror, their last sight the approaching plasma blade that would end their lives. Jin Woo didn't flinch. "The Grand Inquisitor warned you," Jin Woo continued, as if Vader hadn't just drawn his weapon. "Standard tactics won't work. Your Force abilities operate on different principles than my power. Your lightsaber, impressive as it is just another energy weapon." He raised one hand, and shadows began to coil around his fingers. "I've faced gods and monsters, Vader. I've conquered death. What can you possibly do that I haven't already survived?" "I will show you," Vader said, and moved. Force speed propelled him across the distance in less than a second, his cybernetically enhanced body moving with inhuman velocity. His lightsaber came down in a Form V Gem Meso power strike designed to overwhelm an opponent's defense through pure kinetic force. Jin Woo blocked it with his dagger. The impact sent shockwaves through the canyon, the collision of lightsaber and shadow-forged metal creating a thunderclap that echoed off the walls. Vader's yellow eyes widened fractionally behind his mask, not in surprise that the blade had been blocked, but at how it had been blocked. The dagger wasn't just resisting the lightsaber. It was pushing back, forcing Vader's blade away with strength that exceeded even his cybernetic augmentations. "Impressive," Vader admitted, disengaging and circling. His tactical analysis was already running. Opponent possessed superhuman strength, weapon capable of withstanding lightsaber contact, combat reflexes equal to or exceeding Force-enhanced speed. But strength is meaningless without technique. He attacked again, this time with the refined precision that had made him legendary. Form V Gem, so merged with Form 2 Makashi, power and finesse combining into an assault that had killed Jedi Masters. His lightsaber became a crimson blur, each strike calculated to probe defenses, create openings, and exploit weaknesses. Jin Woo met every strike, not with form-based defensive patterns, but with pure combat efficiency refined through 10,000 battles. His dagger moved in economical arcs, never wasting motion, always positioned to intercept Vader's blade at the optimal angle. It was a style Vader had never encountered. No Jedi forms, No Sith techniques, just perfect understanding of angles, timing, and kinetic force. After 15 seconds of sustained assault, Vader was forced to disengage. His breathing remained steady behind the mask, but his internal processors were recalculating. This opponent was matching him move for move, and doing so without any connection to the Force whatsoever. "You fight well," Vader said, his tone carrying grudging respect. "But combat is more than blade work." He thrust out his hand, and the Force obeyed with crushing intensity. Invisible pressure seized Jin Woo's body, attempting to lift him off the ground and squeeze the life from him. It was the same technique Vader had used to kill admirals and crush rebel soldiers, raw telekinetic force that could crumple durasteel. Jin Woo's body tensed under the pressure, then relaxed as his own power pushed back. Ruler's authority. The two telekinetic forces collided in midair, invisible pressure waves meeting and canceling each other. The ground beneath both combatants cracked from the residual force. Dust and small rocks lifted into the air, suspended in the zone where two impossible powers were locked in contest. Vader increased his output, drawing deeper on the dark side. His rage and pain, the eternal fuel of his power, surged through him, amplifying his connection to the Force. The pressure intensified, enough to crush bone, to pulverize internal organs. Jin Woo's expression remained calm as he matched the increase. His mana reserves, refined through countless dungeon raids and refined by his ascension to Shadow Monarch, were effectively limitless for combat purposes. Ruler's authority drew from his personal power, not some external energy field. The telekinetic stalemate held for 3 seconds. Then Jin Woo pushed harder, and Vader's force grip shattered like glass. The Dark Lord actually stumbled backward, his mechanical breathing hitching for a fraction of a second. In 20 years of serving the Empire, no one had overpowered his telekinesis through brute force. Not Jedi Masters, not Inquisitors, not even the Emperor himself. Though Palpatine's superior technique meant he'd never needed to. "Your force is powerful," Jin Woo observed, "but it's limited by your connection to those microscopic organisms in your cells. My power comes from a different source entirely, one that doesn't rely on biological mechanisms or mystical energy fields." He flexed his fingers, and shadows erupted from the ground around Vader. "Let me demonstrate." The shadows lunged like striking serpents, dozens of tendrils attempting to wrap around Vader's limbs. The Dark Lord responded instantly, his lightsaber cutting through shadow constructs with surgical precision. Each severed tendril dissipated into black mist, but 3 more took its place. Vader called on the Force to repel the shadows, pushing them back with a spherical barrier of raw power. It worked, temporarily. But Jin Woo simply generated more shadows, an endless supply that poured from his connection to the shadow dimension. "You're attempting to overwhelm me through attrition," Vader said, his analytical mind identifying the strategy. "Interesting, but futile." He raised both hands and unleashed force lightning. Blue-white electricity arced from his fingertips, crackling through the air with the distinctive scent of ozone. It was one of the purest expressions of dark side power, raw hatred and suffering channeled into destructive energy. The lightning tore through Jin Woo's shadow constructs, dissipating them instantly, and struck Jin Woo himself with enough voltage to reduce most beings to charred husks. Jin Woo's body spasmed as the electricity coursed through him. His health bar, visible only to him through the system interface, dropped by 15%. Actual damage. The first real injury he'd taken since arriving in this galaxy. "Finally," Jin Woo said through gritted teeth, his voice carrying something that might have been satisfaction. "Something that can hurt me, He moved forward through the lightning, his S-rank durability allowing him to endure what would kill ordinary beings. His dagger came up in a strike aimed at Vader's midsection, fast enough that even forced precognition barely registered it in time. Vader twisted, using his cybernetic body's enhanced reflexes to avoid the killing blow. The dagger scraped across his armor, carving a deep gouge through the durasteel plating but not penetrating to flesh. The two combatants separated, circling each other with renewed respect. Vader's armor was damaged, a feat that almost never occurred. Jin Woo's health was reduced, something that happened even more rarely. "You can be harmed," Vader observed. "The lightning damaged you, which means you can be killed." "Eventually," Jin Woo conceded, "if you can land enough hits before I adapt. But how long can you sustain that output? Force lightning drains your power reserves. My regeneration is constant. This becomes a war of attrition, and I've already demonstrated superior telekinetic strength." Vader's respirator breathed steadily as he calculated. The entity was correct. Sustaining force lightning at killing intensity for extended periods would drain even his considerable reserves. And if that telekinetic power was truly limitless, as suggested? "I do not need to kill you through attrition," Vader said. "I simply need to find the right weapon." He reached out through the Force, not at Jin Woo directly, but at the canyon walls surrounding them. Massive sections of rock, hundreds of tons of stone, tore free from their moorings and hurtled toward Jin Woo from all directions simultaneously. Jin Woo's ruler's authority flared, catching the incoming projectiles and holding them suspended in midair. But even his power had limits when dealing with massive physical objects. The stones hung motionless, trembling under the competing forces, neither advancing nor retreating. That moment of divided attention was what Vader had been waiting for. He launched himself forward with a force-enhanced leap, his lightsaber already in motion. The attack came from Jin Woo's blind spot, precisely timed to catch him while his telekinesis was occupied with the falling rocks. Jin Woo's combat instincts screamed warning. He released his hold on the stones and spun, bringing his dagger up in a desperate parry. He was fast, faster than Vader had anticipated, but not quite fast enough. Vader's lightsaber carved across Jin Woo's left shoulder, the plasma blade burning through his coat and searing flesh. The damage was superficial. Jin Woo's durability prevented deeper penetration, but it was another confirmed hit. Proof that sufficient speed and tactical cunning could overcome raw power. Jin Woo's counterattack was immediate and brutal. His knee came up toward Vader's midsection with enough force to dent starship hulls. Vader blocked with his cybernetic arm, the impact producing a metallic clang that echoed through the canyon. Then Jin Woo's other hand shot forward, fingers aimed at Vader's throat in a strike that would crush his windpipe. Vader caught the hand with his own, both combatants' supernatural strength locked in a contest that cracked the ground beneath their feet. They stood face to face, close enough that Jin Woo could see his own reflection in Vader's mask lenses, close enough that Vader could feel the absolute coldness radiating from the entity that existed outside the Force. "You are powerful," Vader acknowledged, his mechanical voice barely above a whisper. "More powerful than any opponent I have faced since..." He paused, some buried memory surfacing briefly. "Since I lost myself on Mustafar. But power without purpose is meaningless. What do you truly want, Shadow Monarch? Why challenge an empire you have no stake in?" Jin Woo's purple eyes blazed. "Because I've seen what happens when tyrants go unopposed. I watched my world nearly fall to beings who thought themselves gods. I killed them, every single one, because someone had to." His grip tightened, and Vader's cybernetic hand began to buckle under the pressure. "Your empire is the same. Different galaxy, same tyranny. and I will tear it down the same way I tore down the monarchs who threatened my world." "Noble words," Vader said. "But you will find that the Galactic Empire is not so easily toppled. The Emperor's power exceeds mine by orders of magnitude. If you think I am your greatest challenge, you are gravely mistaken." "Then I'll cross that bridge when I come to it," Jin Woo said. "Right now, my only concern is whether you're going to keep fighting or accept reality." "What reality?" "That you can't beat me. Not today. Not with your current capabilities." Jin Woo's expression was calm, matter-of-fact. "We can continue this fight. I'll take more damage, you'll expend more resources, and eventually one of us will make a mistake. Or we can both acknowledge that this engagement has reached a stalemate and discuss terms." Vader's first instinct was to reject the suggestion outright. He was Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, breaker of Jedi and terror of the rebellion. He did not negotiate with opponents, he crushed them. But his tactical processors were delivering uncomfortable data. His force reserves were at 63%, higher than most extended engagements, but concerning given how little damage he'd inflicted. His cybernetic systems had taken hits that would require repair, and most critically, his opponent showed no signs of fatigue or resource depletion. A protracted battle favored the Shadow Monarch, which meant continuing to fight was strategically inadvisable. Vader hated that calculation, but he'd learned long ago to separate emotion from tactics when necessary. "What terms?" he asked, his tone suggesting that any unreasonable demands would result in immediate combat resumption. "Lothal remains under my protection," Jin Woo stated. "Imperial forces evacuate completely within 72 hours. In exchange, I will not pursue retreating forces or attack other Imperial worlds. This planet becomes neutral territory. The Emperor will never accept." "The Emperor," Jin Woo interrupted, "is not here. You are, and you have sufficient authority to make tactical decisions regarding localized engagements." His eyes narrowed. "Or am I wrong? Are you simply a weapon to be wielded, with no capacity for independent strategic assessment?" The barb struck deeper than any physical blow could have. Vader's rage surged. How dare this entity question his autonomy, his capability, his authority? But beneath the anger was a truth he'd spent 2 decades trying to bury. He was a weapon, the Emperor's enforcer, a tool to be deployed against threats and discarded when no longer useful. "I have authority," Vader said coldly, "and I calculate that attempting to hold Lothal against your forces would result in unacceptable casualties for minimal strategic gain. The planet has limited industrial value. Its loss would not significantly impact Imperial operations." "Then we have an agreement." "No," Vader said firmly. "We have a temporary cessation of hostilities. You believe you have won, that your power makes you invincible. But I sense weakness in you, Shadow Monarch. Your arrogance, your certainty that you understand this galaxy after less than a week. That blindness will be your downfall." Jin Woo tilted his head. "Perhaps. But until that day comes, Lothal is mine. Respected or contested, your choice." Both combatants released their grips simultaneously, stepping back to combat-ready positions, but not resuming the fight. The canyon was silent, except for Vader's mechanical breathing and the whisper of wind through the rock formations. "I will report this engagement to the Emperor," Vader said. "He will make the final determination regarding your status." "I look forward to meeting him," Jin Woo said with absolute sincerity. "I'm curious whether his power matches his reputation." Vader turned and began walking toward his tie advanced, his cape billowing dramatically. But he paused at the canyon's edge and looked back. One more thing, Shadow Monarch. The Inquisitors you have claimed. They will betray you. The dark side corrupts all who touch it. Their loyalty is temporary, sustained only by fear. Fear is a tool, Jin Woo replied, and tools can be replaced. But you're wrong about one thing. I don't rely on loyalty based on ideology or emotion. I rely on practical self-interest. As long as serving me is their best chance of survival and advancement, they'll remain useful. Vader studied him for a moment longer, then nodded fractionally. Perhaps you understand the nature of power better than I initially credited. We will meet again, Shadow Monarch, and next time I will be prepared for your unique capabilities. I'm counting on it, Jin Woo said. Vader departed, using the Force to lift himself to his ship in a display of casual power. The TIE Advanced's engines roared to life, and the black starfighter rose into the sky, ascending rapidly toward orbit. As the ship disappeared into the clouds, the canyon erupted in activity. The Spectres emerged from their defensive positions, staring at Jin Woo with renewed awe and terror. The Grand Inquisitor and his fellow Inquisitors approached cautiously, their expressions unreadable. You fought Darth Vader to a standstill, the Grand Inquisitor said quietly. I did not think such a thing was possible. It's possible because I'm not bound by your Force, Jin Woo replied. He's powerful, but his power has defined limits. Mine... He flexed his hand, shadows coiling around his fingers. Mine can be expanded indefinitely, given enough time and resources. Kanan approached, his face pale. What now? You've claimed Lothal, fought Vader, and basically declared war on the Empire. What's your next move? Jin Woo looked out across the canyon, his mind already calculating probabilities and strategies. Now we build. Fortify Lothal as a base of operations. Expand the Shadow Army. Establish intelligence networks throughout the sector. And prepare for the inevitable confrontation with the Emperor. You're really going to fight him, Hera said. Palpatine, the most powerful Sith Lord in history. I've fought worse, Jin Woo said simply. But first, I need more data, more shadows, more power. He turned to address the assembled group. Welcome to the beginning of something new. The Empire ruled this galaxy through fear and military might. I'm going to show them that there are worse things to fear than Imperial tyranny. As the twin suns of Lothal began to set, casting long shadows across the canyons, Sung Jin Woo stood at the center of his growing empire and smiled. The hunt had only just begun. The Emperor's throne room on Coruscant existed in perpetual twilight, lit only by the pale glow of the city planet visible through massive viewports. Darth Vader knelt before the raised dais, where Emperor Palpatine sat shrouded in his dark robes. Yellow Sith eyes gleaming with malevolent intelligence as he reviewed the data from Lothal. Fascinating, Palpatine hissed, his ancient voice carrying the weight of decades spent mastering the dark side. An entity that exists outside the Force entirely, one who can raise the dead and bend your Inquisitors to his will. His gnarled fingers tapped against the armrest of his throne. And you allowed him to keep Lothal. A tactical decision, my master, Vader said, his tone carefully neutral. The cost of retaking the planet would have been prohibitive. Thousands of troops converted to his army. Multiple capital ships potentially lost. And all for a world of limited strategic value. Limited strategic value? Palpatine repeated, tasting the words. Yet, it represents the first Imperial world successfully claimed by an external force since the Empire's founding. The symbolism alone makes it invaluable. His eyes narrowed. Unless you believe this Shadow Monarch represents a threat even you cannot overcome? The question was a trap, and Vader knew it. Admit weakness, and the Emperor would consider him a failed tool requiring replacement. Claim invincibility, and he'd be ordered to immediately retake Lothal regardless of casualties. "I believe," Vader said carefully, "that conventional Imperial tactics are insufficient against an enemy who can resurrect our fallen as his soldiers. Overwhelming force becomes counterproductive when each casualty strengthens the opponent." He paused, accessing the tactical recordings stored in his armor's memory banks. "His power is substantial, equal to mine in direct combat, possibly superior in raw telekinetic force." Palpatine leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. "Superior to, you? How delightful. I have not encountered a being with such capabilities since..." He trailed off, some ancient memory surfacing. "Since the old Sith Lords who could manipulate life and death itself, before the rule of two simplified our order." "He claims to be a monarch," Vader continued, "from a dimension beyond our galaxy. His power structure suggests a hierarchical system of godlike beings engaged in eternal conflict. He conquered death by killing and consuming his predecessor." "Consumed," Palpatine murmured. "How very Sith of him. Yet he claims no connection to the dark side." At Vader's confirming nod, the Emperor cackled, a dry, papery sound that echoed through the throne room. Magnificent. Power without ideology. Strength without the burden of the Force's mystical philosophy. This Shadow Monarch may prove to be exactly what I need. Vader's mechanical breathing hitched fractionally. "My master?" "Consider the strategic landscape, my apprentice," Palpatine said, his tone shifting to the lecturing cadence of a teacher instructing a student. "The rebellion grows bolder. Senators whisper sedition in dark corners. My moffs scheme for power. The Empire is strong, yes, but it requires constant maintenance, constant fear, constant reminders of consequences." His smile widened. "What if we had a weapon that existed outside the Force? One that even rogue Jedi could not sense or predict? One that could eliminate threats without revealing Imperial involvement?" Understanding dawned cold in Vader's mind. "You want to turn him, to make the Shadow Monarch serve the Empire." "Not serve," Palpatine corrected. "Ally. Partnership implies mutual benefit, which is far more stable than servitude enforced through fear alone. He wants territory to rule. We have 10,000 worlds of marginal value that could be ceded to his control. He wants to build an army. The rebellion provides an endless supply of corpses. He wants power." The Emperor's eyes gleamed. "I can teach him secrets of the dark side that will amplify his abilities beyond his current limitations." "And if he refuses?" Vader asked. "Then we destroy him," Palpatine said simply. "But not through direct assault. That would be wasteful and inefficient. No, we would starve him. Quarantine Lothal completely. No ships in or out. No trade. No resources. Let him rule over ash and starvation until his followers abandon him or he emerges seeking terms." The Emperor waved one gnarled hand dismissively. "But I suspect he is pragmatic enough to recognize opportunity when presented properly." Vader processed this strategy with his characteristic analytical precision. It had merit. The Shadow Monarch had demonstrated tactical thinking rather than blind aggression. If approached correctly, with sufficient incentives, he might indeed choose alliance over prolonged conflict. But something about the proposal unsettled Vader. Perhaps it was the memory of Jin Woo's purple eyes, completely empty of fear or doubt. Perhaps it was the casual way he discussed fighting the Emperor as merely another challenge to overcome. Or perhaps it was simply that Vader recognized something of his younger self in the Shadow Monarch. a being who'd once believed that power and skill could overcome any obstacle, before Mustafar had taught him the price of such arrogance. "I will prepare an envoy," Palpatine continued. "Someone persuasive, not an Inquisitor, those have proven inadequate. Perhaps Grand Moff Tarkin. His strategic mind and lack of force sensitivity might prove advantageous in negotiations." "Tarkin will demand military support," Vader observed. "He does not negotiate from positions of perceived weakness. Then we will provide sufficient show of force to avoid appearing weak, while ensuring our assets can withdraw if the Shadow Monarch proves unreceptive." Palpatine's smile was predatory. "And you, my apprentice, will accompany the delegation. Your presence will remind this monarch that the Empire's power extends far beyond one world. That cooperation is in his best interest." Vader inclined his head in acknowledgement, though internally his tactical processors were already identifying the flaws in this approach. The Emperor was thinking in terms of Imperial power structures, hierarchy, fear, and strategic incentives. But Jin Woo had explicitly rejected those frameworks. He'd claimed Lothal not for resources or strategic position, but to deny it to what he perceived as tyranny. Ideological opponents were far more dangerous than pragmatic ones. They couldn't be bought or intimidated. They had to be destroyed or converted, and conversion required understanding motivations that the Emperor, for all his mastery of manipulation, might not recognize in a being from outside this galaxy entirely. "There is one other matter, my master," Vader said. "The Shadow Monarch's stated goal is to tear down the Empire, as he claims to have torn down similar tyrannies in his home dimension. He views us as merely another obstacle to be overcome." "Let him maintain that belief," Palpatine said with amusement. "Arrogance blinds even the most powerful beings. He has conquered death? Commendable. He has fought gods and monsters? Impressive. But he has never faced the focused will of a galactic empire with 1,000,000 worlds, 1,000,000,000,000 citizens, and military assets beyond his comprehension." The Emperor's voice dropped to a sinister whisper. "We will let him believe he is the predator, right until the moment he realizes he has always been prey." On Lothal, Jin Woo had no knowledge of the Emperor's machinations. He stood in the former Imperial Governor's Palace, now his operational headquarters, reviewing holographic displays that showed the planet's infrastructure, resources, and population distribution. His Shadow Army had spent the past week systematically securing every major population center, establishing checkpoints, and ensuring the orderly evacuation of Imperial forces. The evacuation itself had been remarkably efficient. Within 48 hours of Vader's departure, Imperial troop transports had begun lifting off from spaceports across the planet. Stormtroopers, officers, administrators, and support personnel, all withdrawing in disciplined formation. No last stands, no sabotage. Just clean professional retreat, which made Jin Woo suspicious. "They're giving up too easily," he said, addressing the Grand Inquisitor who stood nearby. "Vader lost our engagement, yes, but the Empire has resources to continue the fight. Star destroyers, orbital bombardment, strategic asset denial. They could make holding this world significantly more expensive. The Empire doesn't waste resources on unwinnable engagements," the Grand Inquisitor explained. "If the cost-benefit analysis suggests that retaking Lothal would be prohibitive, they'll simply write it off and focus elsewhere. It's efficient if cruel to those they abandon." Jin Woo wasn't convinced. He'd spent too long fighting enemies who never gave up easily, who'd throw everything they had at a problem rather than accept defeat. The Empire's measured response felt wrong. Too calculated, too strategic for what should have been an emotional reaction to their first significant territorial loss. "Or they're planning something," Jin Woo said quietly, "letting me consolidate power on one world so they can study my methods. learn my capabilities, then strike with a strategy designed specifically to counter my advantages. That would be very Tarkin, the Grand Inquisitor observed. Grand Moff Tarkin commands the Death Star battle station. His strategic doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force applied at critical moments. If the Emperor puts him in charge of the Lothal problem, expect siege tactics and potentially planet-destroying weapons. Jin Woo's eyes narrowed. Death Star. I've seen references in the memories I've extracted. A moon-sized battle station capable of destroying planets with a single shot. The ultimate expression of Imperial military philosophy, the Grand Inquisitor confirmed. Rule through fear. No planet will dare rebel if rebellion means total annihilation. It's scheduled to become operational within the year. Jin Woo filed that information away in his constantly expanding tactical database. A planet-destroying weapon changed the strategic calculus significantly. He could fight Star Destroyers. He could kill Inquisitors and potentially even defeat Vader in a rematch. But could his powers protect an entire planet from a weapon that shattered worlds? Unknown. Which meant it was a variable that needed to be addressed before it became operational. I need intelligence on this Death Star, Jin Woo said. Construction location, defensive capabilities, command structure, and most importantly, technical vulnerabilities. Everything the Empire doesn't want us to know. That information is classified at the highest levels, the Grand Inquisitor said. Even I only knew of the Death Star's existence, not its specifications. You'd need access to Imperial Strategic Command archives on Coruscant or we steal it, Jin Woo finished, from the Death Star itself. The Grand Inquisitor stared at him. You want to infiltrate the most heavily defended military installation in the galaxy to steal classified schematics? Not personally, Jin Woo clarified. That's what shadow soldiers are for. They don't show up on force detection. They can impersonate Imperial personnel perfectly. And if they're discovered and destroyed, I simply extract more shadows to replace them. He gestured at the holographic display. The Empire's greatest strength, their massive military, is also their greatest vulnerability to someone who can turn soldiers into loyal servants. Every facility they operate, every ship they crew, every installation they defend becomes a potential infiltration vector. The Grand Inquisitor was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. Jin Woo wasn't planning to fight the Empire through conventional warfare. He was going to hollow it out from within, converting soldiers, stealing intelligence, and establishing shadow networks throughout Imperial space. By the time the Empire realized the scope of the infiltration, it would be too late. That's actually brilliant, the Grand Inquisitor admitted, and utterly ruthless. You're not giving them a war they can fight. You're giving them an invisible cancer that spreads through their own forces. War is about identifying advantages and exploiting them, Jin Woo said simply. The Empire has numbers, resources, and established infrastructure. I have the ability to convert their numbers into my numbers, to extract knowledge from their captured personnel, and to operate outside their detection methods. Conventional warfare would be a stalemate. Unconventional warfare. He smiled slightly. That's where I excel. A chime interrupted the conversation, the communication console indicating an incoming priority transmission. Jin Woo gestured, and a hologram materialized above the projector. It showed Grand Moff Tarkin, his severe features and cold eyes instantly recognizable from extracted Imperial memories. Behind him stood Darth Vader, a silent promise of violence should negotiations fail. Shadow Monarch, Tarkin said without preamble, his crisp Imperial accent carrying across the light years. I am Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin, commander of the Death Star battle station and strategic advisor to Emperor Palpatine. I am contacting you regarding the status of Lothal and potential arrangements that might prove mutually beneficial. Jin Woo studied the hologram with analytical precision. Tarkin's body language radiated confidence despite addressing someone who'd fought Vader to a standstill. His tone suggested negotiation from a position of strength, not desperation. And the casual mention of the Death Star was clearly intended as both introduction and threat. Grand Moff Tarkin, Jin Woo acknowledged. I'm surprised the Empire is interested in negotiation. I was under the impression your standard response to territorial loss was overwhelming retaliation. Under normal circumstances, yes, Tarkin agreed. But Emperor Palpatine recognizes that you represent an unusual situation. An entity from beyond our galaxy with capabilities that render conventional military doctrine inadequate. Attempting to crush you through brute force would be wasteful and inefficient. His expression remained neutral. The Emperor proposes an alternative. Alliance. Jin Woo's expression didn't change, but internally he was recalculating rapidly. An alliance offer. Not submission, not terms of surrender, but partnership. Which meant the Emperor believed Jin Woo was either too powerful to defeat cost-effectively, or potentially more valuable as an asset than as an enemy. Both possibilities were dangerous. Alliance implies mutual benefit. Jin Woo said carefully. What exactly is the Emperor offering, and what does he expect in return? Territory, Tarkin said bluntly. The Empire controls millions of worlds. Many are of marginal value. Frontier planets, backwater systems, territories requiring constant military presence to maintain order. His Majesty would be willing to cede administrative control of such worlds to you, allowing you to build your kingdom, while freeing Imperial resources for more strategic concerns. In exchange for assistance with problematic situations that require your unique capabilities, Tarkin continued. Rebel cells that have proven difficult to eliminate. Rogue Force users beyond the Inquisitorius' reach. Internal threats where Imperial involvement would be politically complicated. He paused meaningfully. The Emperor envisions a galaxy where the Empire maintains overall strategic control while specialized assets, such as yourself, handle situations requiring unconventional approaches. It was, Jin Woo had to admit, a tempting offer. Territory to expand his operations, resources to build his army, targets that would provide combat experience and shadow extraction opportunities. All without the immediate need to fight the entire Empire simultaneously. It was also, obviously, a trap. And if I refuse this generous offer? Jin Woo asked. Tarkin's expression hardened. Then Lothal becomes a demonstration, not of the Empire's current military strength, which you have proven capable of resisting, but of our strategic patience and absolute resolve. We will establish a total blockade. No ships in or out, no trade, no resources beyond what the planet can provide internally. You may rule Lothal in perpetuity, but you will rule over a dying world slowly starving in isolation. You would condemn millions of civilians to starvation to make a point? Jin Woo's voice carried an edge of cold anger. I would ensure that every potential rebel system understands the cost of defying Imperial authority. Tarkin corrected. Lothal's suffering would prevent countless other worlds from making similar mistakes. It's strategically sound, if regrettable. Jin Woo studied Tarkin's face, searching for any hint of deception or hesitation. He found none. The Grand Moff genuinely believed in his doctrine of terror through overwhelming response. He would starve Lothal without hesitation if Jin Woo rejected the alliance. Which meant Jin Woo had to make a choice. Accept a partnership with a tyrannical empire to gain resources and territory, or maintain his principles and watch millions suffer for his defiance. It was exactly the kind of impossible choice he'd hoped to avoid. "I need time to consider," Jin Woo said finally. "This isn't a decision to make lightly." "You have 48 hours, Tarkin said. "After that, the blockade begins regardless of your answer. The Emperor's patience, while considerable, is not infinite." The Hamad hologram cut out, leaving Jin Woo alone with the Grand Inquisitor and his thoughts. "He's serious," the Grand Inquisitor said quietly. "Tarkin doesn't make empty threats. If you refuse, Lothal dies slowly." "I know," Jin Woo said, "which is why I need to find a third option. One that doesn't involve serving the Empire or abandoning the people I claim to protect." "What third option exists?" Jin Woo's eyes glowed purple as his mind raced through possibilities, calculating probabilities, identifying leverage points. "I don't know yet, but I've been in impossible situations before. There's always a path forward if you're willing to take risks that conventional thinking would reject." He turned to the holographic display of Lothal, then expanded it to show the surrounding star systems. The Empire controlled them all, a web of military infrastructure and strategic assets that could be leveraged to enforce the threatened blockade, unless those assets were compromised from within. "How many shadow soldiers do we have now?" Jin Woo asked. 317, the Grand Inquisitor reported. "Mostly stormtroopers, but including 14 officers with command-level access and 3 pilots." "Not enough," Jin Woo said. "We need thousands, tens of thousands, inserted into Imperial forces throughout the sector before the blockade begins." His mind was already formulating the infiltration strategy. If the Empire wants to blockade Lothal, they'll need ships, crews, and supply lines, all of which can be sabotaged by shadow soldiers operating under deep cover. "You're going to start a shadow war," the Grand Inquisitor said, understanding dawning. "Not a conventional conflict the Empire can respond to, but systematic infiltration and sabotage from within their own ranks." "Exactly," Jin Woo confirmed. "And while they're trying to contain the internal bleeding, I'm going to do what I do best. Hunt the biggest threat and remove it permanently." "You mean the Emperor?" "I mean," Jin Woo said, his voice cold with absolute certainty, "that if the Empire wants war, I'll give them one they can't win. Not through battles or territory, but by proving that their greatest weapon, their vast military, is also their greatest vulnerability." He looked out the palace windows at Lothal's capital city, where citizens were cautiously emerging from their homes now that Imperial occupation had ended. Families reuniting, businesses reopening. The first tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be better. Jin Woo had made a promise when he claimed this world: protection from the Empire. He intended to keep that promise, even if it meant fighting a guerrilla war against the largest military force in the galaxy. 48 hours, Jin Woo murmured. "That's how long they think it will take me to make a decision. They're wrong. I've already decided." "And what have you decided?" Jin Woo's smile was cold and predatory. "War. But on my terms, not theirs." The Grand Inquisitor felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. He'd served the Empire for decades, witnessed atrocities beyond counting, and thought himself immune to fear. But looking at the Shadow Monarch's glowing purple eyes, he understood that Lothal's claim had been merely the opening move in a game that would reshape the entire galaxy. The Empire had made a critical error. They'd given Jin Woo time to plan, and the Shadow Monarch's plans always ended with his enemies destroyed and their power consumed. The next 48 hours transformed Lothal from an occupied world into a fortress. Jin Woo worked with mechanical efficiency, leveraging every resource at his disposal to prepare for the Empire's response. His shadow army expanded exponentially, not through combat but through systematic extraction from the Imperial facilities the evacuating forces had left behind. Every military installation held bodies. Soldiers killed in training accidents, prisoners executed in detention centers. Even the unfortunate victims of Imperial justice, whose corpses had been dumped in mass graves outside the cities. Jin Woo found them all, and he raised them all. Shadow extraction successful X-1247. Current Shadow Army, 11,000 plus soldiers, 1,247 stormtroopers, 47 officers, 12 pilots, 4 Inquisitors, 1 Shadow, 3 living. But numbers alone wouldn't win this war. Jin Woo needed intelligence, infiltration capabilities, and most critically, he needed to demonstrate that the Empire's blockade threat was meaningless against an enemy who could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. Which was why, 36 hours before Tarkin's deadline, Jin Woo dispatched 200 Shadow soldiers on a mission that would either validate his strategy or prove it catastrophically flawed. "You want them to infiltrate Imperial Star Destroyers," Hera said, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. "Active military vessels with full crews and operational security protocols? That's insane." "That's isometric warfare," Jin Woo corrected. "The Empire expects resistance to come from ships, ground forces, or orbital defenses, assets they can detect and destroy. They don't expect the enemy to already be inside their installations, wearing their uniforms, following their protocols perfectly." Kanan, who'd been watching Jin Woo's preparations with growing unease, finally spoke up. "You're going to turn their own military against them, not through recruitment or ideological conversion, but by replacing their soldiers with your shadows one death at a time." "Exactly," Jin Woo confirmed without hesitation. "Every Imperial soldier who dies in the line of duty, every casualty from combat or accident, becomes a potential shadow. The Empire has millions of personnel across thousands of worlds. Even if I only extract a fraction of them, that's an army they can't fight because they won't know who's been compromised until it's too late." The Grand Inquisitor nodded slowly, his tactical mind appreciating the horrifying elegance of the strategy. "It's perfect for your capabilities. The Force can't detect your shadows. They register as normal soldiers to Force users. Standard Imperial security relies heavily on Inquisitors and Force-sensitive personnel to identify threats. Against you, that advantage becomes meaningless." "And once the shadows are in position," Jin Woo continued, "they feed me intelligence, sabotage critical systems during key moments, and create chaos from within. The Empire will be forced to suspect everyone, which destroys unit cohesion and operational efficiency." His purple eyes glowed brighter. "Tarkin thinks he can blockade Lothal? I'm going to infiltrate his blockade fleet and turn it into my invasion force." Sabine whistled low. "That's actually brilliant in a terrifying way. The more ships they send to blockade us, the more targets you have for infiltration." "Precisely," Jin Woo said. "And while they're dealing with internal security nightmares, I'm going to address the real problem, the Emperor himself." The room went silent. Even the Grand Inquisitor, who'd accepted Jin Woo's power as genuine, looked shocked. "You're going to assassinate the Emperor," Kanan said quietly. "You're actually planning to kill Palpatine." "Not assassination," Jin Woo corrected. "Confrontation. I want him to know I'm coming. I want him to prepare his defenses, gather his power, and meet me at full strength." His expression was utterly serious. "Because if I kill the Emperor through stealth or surprise, his supporters will claim it was luck or treachery. But if I defeat him in direct combat, after he's had time to prepare, then the entire galaxy will know that the Empire's ultimate power was insufficient." "You want to break him publicly?" the Grand Inquisitor breathed. To demonstrate that even the most powerful Sith Lord is vulnerable to the Shadow Monarch. It's not about conquering the Empire. It's about destroying the myth of Imperial invincibility. The Empire rules through fear, Jin Woo said. Fear of the military, fear of Vader, fear of the Emperor. Remove that fear and the entire structure becomes unstable. Regional governors will rebel. Systems will declare independence. The military will fragment into warlord factions. He paused. I don't need to conquer the Empire. I just need to prove it can be defeated. The galaxy will tear it apart from within. Ezra, who'd been quietly absorbing everything, finally spoke. But if you kill the Emperor, won't that just create chaos? Millions could die in the power vacuum. Systems at war with each other, warlords enslaving planets. Possibly, Jin Woo acknowledged. But those are the galaxy's problems to solve. I'm not here to establish a new order or govern millions of worlds. I'm here because I accidentally fell into this dimension and found another tyranny that needed dismantling. His voice hardened. The people of this galaxy will have to find their own path forward. I can't and won't do that for them. But I can remove the boot from their necks and give them the chance to try. It was a brutally honest answer that left the rebels uncomfortable. They'd spent years fighting for a free galaxy, imagining a restoration of the Republic or some new democratic system. Jin Woo was offering something far more uncertain. Freedom through destruction, with no guarantee of what would follow. And what about Lothal? Hera asked. You claim this world under your protection. Are you abandoning it once you've killed the Emperor? No, Jin Woo said firmly. Lothal will remain under my protection until a stable government emerges in this sector. Whether that's your rebel alliance, a regional coalition, or something else entirely. He looked at each of them in turn. I keep my promises, always. That's not negotiable. The conviction in his voice was absolute. The Spectres had learned enough about Jin Woo over the past weeks to understand that he meant exactly what he said. No deception, no hidden agenda, just pragmatic commitment to stated objectives. So what's the timeline? Kanan asked. Tarkin's deadline expires in 12 hours. The blockade begins. Then what? Then we demonstrate why blockading Lothal is strategically worthless, Jin Woo said. He pulled up a holographic tactical display showing the surrounding star systems. My shadow infiltrators are already positioned on 7 star destroyers in the sector fleet. When the blockade begins, they'll begin a systematic sabotage. Nothing catastrophic enough to destroy the ships, just enough to create cascading failures that require lengthy repairs. You're going to cripple their blockade fleet from within, the Grand Inquisitor said, with something approaching admiration. Stage 1, Jin Woo confirmed. Stage 2, I'm going to use the Ghost to punch through the blockade and travel to Coruscant. Vader knows where I am. The Emperor is expecting either submission or prolonged siege. Neither expects a direct assault on the Imperial capital within days of their ultimatum. That's suicide, Hera said flatly. Coruscant has planetary shields, orbital defense platforms, and more star destroyers than the rest of the sector combined. Even if you fight your way through, you'll be exhausted before you reach the Emperor. I'm not fighting my way through, Jin Woo said. I'm walking through the front door. As a diplomatic envoy responding to Tarkin's offer, requesting an audience with the Emperor to discuss terms. The audacity of it left everyone momentarily speechless. You want to infiltrate the Imperial palace under the guise of negotiation, Kanan said slowly. Get close to the Emperor, then strike when his guard is down. His guard will never be down, Jin Woo corrected. Palpatine didn't survive decades of Sith scheming by being careless. He'll know I'm a threat. He'll prepare for combat. He might even have Vader and his royal guards present as additional security. Jin Woo's smile was predatory. But he'll also be arrogant enough to believe he can either convert me or kill me. That arrogance is the opening I need. And if you're wrong? Sabine asked. If he's prepared something you can't handle? Then I'll adapt, Jin Woo said simply. I've been in worse situations. The Monarch's war ended with me fighting the Monarch of Destruction himself, a being who could erase matter from existence with a thought. I survived by being faster, smarter, and more willing to take risks than my opponent. His eyes blazed purple. Palpatine is powerful, but he's not a monarch. He's just another tyrant who's forgotten that power alone isn't enough to guarantee victory. 12 hours later, right on schedule, the Imperial blockade materialized. 16 Star Destroyers dropped out of hyperspace in coordinated formation, their gray wedge-shaped hulls forming a sphere around Lothal with overlapping firing solutions. Tarkin's voice broadcast across all frequencies. This is Grand Moff Tarkin to the Shadow Monarch. Your deadline has expired. Lothal is now under complete quarantine. No vessels will be permitted to leave or enter the system. Any attempt to breach the blockade will be met with lethal force. You have 48 hours to reconsider the Emperor's offer. After that, supply ships will be turned away, and this world will experience the full consequences of defying Imperial authority. Jin Woo listened to the broadcast from the governor's palace, his expression neutral. Around him, his command staff, the Grand Inquisitor, the living Inquisitors, and the Spectres, waited tensely for his response. Begin Stage 2, Jin Woo said quietly. Throughout the blockade fleet, 200 shadow soldiers received their orders simultaneously. They moved with perfect coordination, each one knowing exactly which systems to compromise. Not the obvious targets like weapons or shields, those would trigger immediate alarms and investigations. Instead, they sabotaged life support calibration systems, hyperdrive coolant regulators, power distribution nodes in non-critical sections, small failures that would cascade over hours into major system breakdowns requiring yard time to repair properly. On the Star Destroyer Exactor, a Shadow stormtrooper on maintenance detail quietly adjusted the atmospheric scrubbers in crew quarters, Section 7. The change was minor, a 2% decrease in oxygen cycling efficiency, barely noticeable initially, but over 24 hours, it would cause crew fatigue, increased errors, and eventually require complete system shutdown and replacement. On the Devastator, a Shadow officer filed a routine maintenance report that accidentally scheduled conflicting repair priorities for the same engineering team. The resulting confusion would delay critical hyperspace maintenance by 6 hours, just enough to push the ship past its operational window before requiring dock time. 16 separate acts of subtle sabotage, each one perfectly timed and executed by operators who felt no guilt, showed no stress, and left no behavioral indicators that might trigger security reviews. By the time the Empire realized what had happened, it would be too late. How long until the sabotage becomes apparent? Kanan asked. 18 to 36 hours, the Grand Inquisitor estimated, having reviewed Jin Woo's infiltration plans. The symptoms will appear gradually enough that individual ships will attribute them to normal wear and maintenance issues. By the time Fleet Command recognizes the pattern, at least 6 Star Destroyers will need to withdraw for repairs, which compromises the blockade integrity, Hera said, understanding dawning. They'll have to either maintain a porous blockade or call in reinforcements, which means admitting their operation has been compromised from the beginning. And while they're dealing with that, Jin Woo said, I'll be on Coruscant, having a very direct conversation with Emperor Palpatine about the future of this galaxy. He turned to address the assembled group. I'm taking the Ghost and a small team. Kanan, Hera, Ezra, you're with me. Your rebel credentials make the diplomatic cover more credible. Grand Inquisitor, you're in command of Lothal during my absence. If the Empire attacks before I return, evacuate civilians to the southern continents and prepare for siege warfare. And the Shadow Army? The Grand Inquisitor asked. Continues infiltration operations. Every Imperial casualty in this sector gets extracted and added to our forces. Every ship, every base, every installation becomes a target for Shadow infiltrators. Jin Woo's voice was cold steel. The Empire wanted to demonstrate consequences for defying their authority. I'm going to demonstrate why trying to blockade the Shadow Monarch was the worst strategic decision they've ever made. 6 hours later, the Ghost approached the Lothal blockade with transponder codes provided by the Grand Inquisitor, diplomatic credentials identifying them as an envoy responding to Tarkin's negotiation offer. The lead Star Destroyer challenged them immediately. Unidentified vessel, you are in violation of Imperial quarantine. State your business or be destroyed. This is the diplomatic vessel Serenity, Hera said smoothly, using the cover identity Jin Woo had established. We're responding to Grand Moff Tarkin's offer of negotiation. The Shadow Monarch requests an audience with Emperor Palpatine on Coruscant to discuss terms. There was a long pause as the Star Destroyer's bridge crew consulted with higher authority. Tarkin had issued the ultimatum expecting either submission after prolonged siege or continued defiance. A diplomatic mission to Coruscant within hours of the deadline was outside predicted responses. Finally, stand by for escort. 2 TIE squadrons will accompany you to the hyperspace jump point. Any deviation from prescribed course will result in immediate destruction. Acknowledge. Acknowledged, Hera said. We're ready to proceed. As the Ghost moved toward the jump point under TIE fighter escort, Ezra looked at Jin Woo with barely concealed fear. We're really doing this, flying into the heart of the Empire with no backup plan. I have a backup plan, Jin Woo said calmly. If diplomacy fails and I need to fight my way out of the Imperial Palace, you 3 get back to the Ghost and run. Don't wait for me. Don't try to help. Just survive and tell the rebellion what happened here. You think you might lose, Kanan said quietly. You're actually considering the possibility that the Emperor could kill you. Jin Woo was silent for a moment before answering. The Emperor is an unknown variable. I've extracted memories from dozens of Imperial personnel, but none of them have seen his full power. Vader described him as beyond comparison to any other Force user. That could be exaggeration born from decades of servitude. He paused. Or it could be accurate assessment. I won't know until we fight. And if it's accurate? Hera asked. Then the galaxy is in serious trouble, Jin Woo admitted. Because if Palpatine's power is genuinely orders of magnitude beyond Vader's, then the only way to defeat him is through methods I'd prefer to avoid. His expression hardened. Methods that would cause significant collateral damage. The implications of that statement hung heavy in the cockpit. They'd all seen what Jin Woo could do. With restraint, 12 TIE fighters crushed, 3 Inquisitors defeated. Vader fought to a standstill. The idea of him fighting without restraint in the densely populated heart of Coruscant. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Kanan said quietly. Agreed, Jin Woo said. But I've learned to prepare for worst-case scenarios. Hope for the best, plan for the worst, and adapt when reality falls somewhere in between. The Ghost reached the hyperspace jump point and received clearance from the escort. Hera's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, and the stars stretched into lines as they made the jump to light speed. Destination: Coruscant, the glittering jewel of the Empire. the seat of power where Emperor Palpatine waited, ancient and terrible, master of the dark side and ruler of 1,000,000 worlds. Sung Jin Woo sat in the cargo hold, eyes closed in meditation, his shadow army stirring restlessly in anticipation. He'd spent 10 years climbing from the weakest, hunter to the Shadow Monarch. He'd fought beings who could manipulate reality itself. He'd conquered death and claimed its throne. Now he would discover if the Emperor of this galaxy was worthy of the fear his name inspired, or if he was simply another tyrant waiting to be added to Jin Woo's collection of shadows. The ghost hurtled through hyperspace toward its destiny, carrying a being from beyond the galaxy who would either liberate or doom an entire civilization through the choices he made in the next 72 hours. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine felt the disturbance approaching through the Force and smiled his terrible smile. "Come then, Shadow Monarch," he whispered to the darkness. "Let us see if you are conqueror or fool." The final confrontation was beginning. Coruscant emerged from hyperspace like a jewel carved from light and metal. A world-spanning city of impossible scale. Its surface entirely covered by layers of civilization built upon civilization across millennia. Trillions of beings lived in the endless vertical sprawl, from the glittering spires of the upper levels where the wealthy and powerful dwelt, to the perpetual darkness of the Undercity, where sunlight never reached. At the planet's heart stood the Imperial Palace, a massive complex that had once been the Jedi Temple before Palpatine had desecrated it and rebuilt it as a monument to Sith dominance. Its pyramidal structure dominated the surrounding cityscape, dark spires reaching toward the sky like claws grasping at the heavens. Jin Woo studied the palace through the ghost's viewport as they descended under Imperial escort, his detection skill mapping the building's security in three-dimensional detail. Thousands of Imperial guards, dozens of hidden weapon emplacements, energy shields capable of withstanding orbital bombardment, and at the structure's heart, a presence that made even his system flicker with warning indicators. Warning: extreme threat detected. Entity power level unknown. Recommended action: extreme caution. Jin Woo dismissed the system warning with a thought. He'd seen similar alerts before facing the Monarchs. The system's threat assessment was useful, but not definitive. Power levels meant nothing if you understood how to exploit weaknesses and adapt to unexpected variables. "Still time to turn back," Kanan said quietly, his Force senses screaming warnings about what waited in the palace below. "This feels wrong, Jin Woo. Like we're flying into a trap that's already sprung." "We are," Jin Woo confirmed without hesitation. "Palpatine knows I'm coming. He's prepared for combat. This entire scenario is designed to put me in an environment he controls, surrounded by his power, where every advantage favors him." His purple eyes glowed faintly. "But I've spent my entire life turning disadvantageous situations into victories. This is no different." The ghost landed on an Imperial platform extending from the palace's mid-levels, flanked by 24 crimson-armored royal guards, the Emperor's elite protectors, trained in combat techniques that allowed them to fight E-Force users without Force sensitivity themselves. Their presence was both honor guard and warning. The Emperor was taking Jin Woo seriously as a threat. As they disembarked, Grand Vizier Masamedi awaited them, a tall Shagrian with distinctive horns and an expression of carefully cultivated neutrality. His role was to serve as the Emperor's voice in administrative matters, though everyone knew he wielded no real power. "The Shadow Monarch," Masameda said, with a slight bow that conveyed courtesy without submission. "Emperor Palpatine extends his welcome and invites you to the throne room for an audience. Your companions may wait in the diplomatic holding area." "No," Jin Woo said flatly. They accompany me, or we leave immediately. Non-negotiable. Mazameda's expression tightened, but after a moment's pause, presumably receiving instructions through a concealed comm link, he nodded. As you wish. The Emperor accommodates your request. This way. They were led through corridors of polished black stone, past chambers where bureaucrats shuffled datapads and military officers planned campaigns across 1,000 worlds. The architecture was designed to intimidate. Vast spaces that made individuals feel insignificant, lighting that cast ominous shadows. And everywhere the sense of absolute power concentrated in service to a single will. Jin Woo had felt similar atmospheres in the high-level dungeons, where boss monsters had created domains designed to crush intruders' spirits before combat even began. The tactic was psychologically effective against those who could be intimidated. He'd stopped being capable of intimidation around the time he'd killed his first monarch. The throne room doors were massive slabs of reinforced durasteel that would withstand anti-tank weapons. They opened with hydraulic precision, revealing a chamber that existed in perpetual twilight. At the room's far end, on a raised dais, sat Emperor Palpatine. He looked ancient and withered, his face a landscape of wrinkles beneath the hood of his dark robes. Yellow Sith eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence from a face that seemed barely alive. But the power radiating from him was anything but weak. Jin Woo's detection skill registered energy signatures that dwarfed anything he'd encountered in this galaxy. Darth Vader stood to the Emperor's right, a silent sentinel whose presence was both bodyguard and statement. Even the Dark Lord of the Sith bowed before this throne. Sung Jin Woo, Palpatine said, his voice a papery whisper that somehow carried across the entire chamber. The Shadow Monarch, slayer of gods, conqueror of death itself. A dry chuckle. You have caused quite the disturbance in my empire, young man. Killed my Inquisitors, defeated my enforcer, claimed one of my worlds. Most impressive. Most foolish, Jin Woo corrected. From your perspective, at least. I'm told wise enemies don't give threats time to grow stronger. He walked forward, ignoring the royal guards, who tensed at his approach. But you invited me here instead of trying to crush me immediately, which means you want something. Indeed, Palpatine said, his smile widening. I want you, Shadow Monarch. Your power, your armies, your capabilities that exist outside the Force. He leaned forward slightly. Join me. Serve the Empire as Vader does, and I will grant you systems to rule, resources beyond measure, and knowledge of the dark side that will amplify your abilities beyond your current comprehension. Together, we could forge a galaxy united under order, free from the chaos of democracy and the weakness of the Jedi philosophy. You're offering me the same thing every tyrant offers, Jin Woo said. Power in exchange for obedience, territory in exchange for service. The illusion of partnership that's actually just another form of slavery. His voice hardened. I've heard this speech before. From beings who thought themselves gods. I killed them all. You'll be no different. The temperature in the throne room seemed to drop. Palpatine's smile remained, but his eyes glittered with something predatory. Bold words from one who has never faced true power. The Emperor hissed. You have fought Inquisitors, children playing with borrowed strength. You have dueled Vader, formidable, yes, but ultimately just a broken man in a suit. You have never confronted someone who has mastered the dark side itself, who has studied the ancient Sith arts for longer than your civilization has existed. He rose from his throne, robes billowing. I am the culmination of a 1,000-year plan. I am the darkness that consumed the light. I am eternal, and you. Palpatine thrust both hands forward, and Force lightning erupted like a storm. It wasn't the controlled technique Vader had used. This was raw, apocalyptic power channeled through decades of dark side mastery. Blue-white electricity filled the throne room with light and thunder, arcing toward Jin Woo with enough voltage to vaporize duraplast and superheat metal to plasma. Jin Woo raised his hand, and shadows erupted to meet the lightning. The collision of dark side energy and shadow power created a maelstrom at the room's center. Lightning crashed against shadow constructs that absorbed and dissipated the electricity even as new bolts found their way through. Jin Woo's health bar dropped, 20%, 25, 30. The Emperor's power was immense, far beyond what Vader had demonstrated. But Jin Woo had faced worse. Shadow exchange. He activated one of his Monarch abilities, the power to swap positions with any of his shadows, instantaneously. One moment he stood at the lightning's epicenter, the next he was behind Palpatine, having exchanged places with a shadow soldier he'd positioned earlier as insurance. His dagger struck toward the Emperor's back with lethal precision. Palpatine spun with impossible speed, his ancient lightsaber hidden in his robes, igniting and intercepting the strike. The collision sent shockwaves through the Force that made every Force-sensitive being on Coruscant flinch. "Impressive," Palpatine admitted, his expression showing genuine interest now rather than theatrical menace. "Dimensional manipulation. You can teleport using your shadow constructs as anchors. That explains how you've evaded detection. One of many abilities you don't understand," Jin Woo said, pressing the attack. His dagger became a blur, each strike calculated to probe defenses and create openings. But Palpatine's lightsaber defense was perfect, not through physical speed, but through precognition that showed him Jin Woo's intentions before the strikes even began. "The Force shows me your every move," Palpatine said, parrying effortlessly. "Your thoughts, your strategies, your intentions, all laid bare to one who has truly mastered foresight. You cannot surprise me, Shadow Monarch. You cannot outthink me. You are powerful, yes, but power without the Force is merely strength, and strength alone has never been enough to defeat true mastery." Jin Woo disengaged, breathing heavily. His health had stabilized at 67%, but the Emperor's words were correct. Precognition was the ultimate defensive advantage. Every attack telegraphed before it landed. Every strategy revealed before it could be executed. Fighting someone who could see the future was like fighting while blindfolded. Unless... Jin Woo smiled. "You're right," he said. "The Force gives you perfect defense. You can see every attack I'm planning, every strategy I'm considering. There's no way to surprise you through conventional tactics." His purple eyes blazed brighter. "So I won't use tactics. I'll just hit you with so much overwhelming force that precognition becomes irrelevant." He thrust both hands toward the ceiling, and ruler's authority seized the entire throne room structure, thousands of tons of reinforced durasteel, support columns, and architectural elements. With a gesture, he brought it all down. The throne room ceiling collapsed in an avalanche of metal and stone. Palpatine's eyes widened fractionally. He'd foreseen the attack, but the scale was beyond what his precognition had suggested possible. He called on the Force, creating a barrier that held back the falling debris through sheer power. But while his attention was divided, Jin Woo moved, not with strategy or technique, but with pure S-rank speed, enhanced by every stat point he'd earned through 10 years of dungeon crawling. He crossed the distance in a microsecond, his dagger aimed not at Palpatine, but at the floor beneath him. The strike shattered the reinforced stone, and both combatants fell into the chamber below. A vast space that had once been the Jedi Temple's meditation chamber, now corrupted into a shrine to the dark side. They hit the ground hard, but both recovered instantly. Palpatine's Force lightning lashed out again, this time at point-blank range. Jin Woo couldn't dodge. The attack was too close, too fast. So he didn't dodge. He activated his most dangerous ability. Monarch's domain. Reality twisted. The chamber, no, the entire palace wing, was suddenly overlaid with Jin Woo's power. This was his territory now. His domain, a space where the rules bent to his will, rather than the universe's laws, the shadow dimension itself partially manifested, darkness seeping through the barriers between realities. In this space, Jin Woo's power was absolute. The Force lightning struck him and dissipated harmlessly, absorbed by the domain's protective properties. Palpatine's expression shifted from confident superiority to genuine concern. Impossible. You've created a bounded field independent of the Force. This should not exist in our reality. Your reality, Jin Woo corrected. I'm from somewhere else, remember? Where I come from, domains are standard for high-level combatants. Now let me show you what the Shadow Monarch can do when fighting on his own terms. His shadow army manifested. Not all 11,000, but enough. 100 shadow soldiers erupted from the darkness, each one attacking with coordinated precision that no living army could match. Palpatine's lightsaber became a crimson blur as he cut through shadows, but for each one destroyed, 2 more took its place. And while the shadows kept him occupied, Jin Woo struck. His dagger found its mark, not a killing blow, but a cut across Palpatine's arm that drew actual blood. First blood, proof that the Emperor was not invincible. Palpatine's rage exploded. Force lightning erupted omnidirectionally, destroying dozens of shadows and cracking the chamber walls. His power surged to levels that made Jin Woo's system scream warnings. Warning: entity entering critical power state. Threat level extreme. You dare, Palpatine hissed, his voice layered with dark side corruption. You dare to wound me? I who have lived for over a century? I who destroyed the Jedi Order? I who command a galaxy? His eyes blazed with unholy light. I will show you why the Sith are eternal, why the dark side is supreme, why I am God of this reality. The Force itself seemed to answer Palpatine's fury. The chamber's corruption intensified, shadows writhing not from Jin Woo's power, but from raw dark side energy. This was Palpatine's true strength, not just personal power, but the accumulated malevolence of the shrine built on the Jedi Temple's desecration, the suffering of trillions channeled through decades of tyranny. Jin Woo felt his monarch's domain begin to crack under the pressure. Palpatine wasn't just powerful. He was a focal point for an entire dimension of hatred and darkness. The dark side wasn't just energy. It was a semi-sentient force that responded to masters who embraced it completely. Impressive, Jin Woo admitted, his domain collapsing as Palpatine's power overwhelmed it. You're stronger than I calculated, possibly as strong as the monarchs at their peak. He smiled, and it was the smile of someone who just found a challenge worthy of his full attention. Good. I was worried this would be too easy. His eyes blazed purple, and his true power emerged. System override. Shadow Monarch authority activated. Limitation removal, accessing full dimensional power. Warning: prolonged usage may destabilize local reality. Jin Woo's form shifted, darkness wreathing him like living armor. His power surged to levels that made his previous displays look like training exercises. This was the Shadow Monarch unrestrained, the being who'd conquered death itself, who commanded armies across dimensions, who'd killed gods and consumed their essence. Come then, Palpatine, Jin Woo said, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't exist in normal space-time. Show me if your dark side can match the abyss that I've mastered. The two beings clashed at the center of the desecrated chamber, and reality itself screamed. Above them, in the throne room, Kanan, Hera, and Ezra huddled behind overturned furniture as the entire palace shook. Vader stood unmoved, his force senses tracking the battle below with something that might have been awe. "Who will win?" Ezra whispered. Vader was silent for a long moment before answering. "Unknown. But regardless of the victor, the galaxy will never be the same." In the chamber below, two impossible powers fought for dominance. The accumulated malevolence of 1,000-year Sith plan against the dimensional authority of a being who transcended death itself. The outcome would reshape everything. The battle for the fate of the galaxy had reached its apex. The Shadow Monarch versus the Dark Lord of the Sith. Power against power. Will against will. And in the balance hung the destiny of trillions. The story of Sung Jin Woo's invasion of the Star Wars galaxy had only just begun. Lothal was merely the first world. Palpatine was merely the first tyrant. The Empire was merely the first obstacle. But the Shadow Monarch had learned long ago that the path forward was built on the bodies of those who stood in the way. Whether through alliance or conquest, through strategy or overwhelming force, he would continue until every chain was broken and every tyrant answered for their crimes. The Force bound all things in this galaxy, but shadows existed everywhere, even where light could not reach. And the Shadow Monarch's domain was growing.